before the election that he would put a cap on energy prices, and he didn't.
Yeah, where's
that? And the cap's disappeared.
I don't want a cap on energy prices. I want us to have a free market, and a free market being based on plentiful, reliable, secure energy, i.e. fossil fuels.
I know. It's the only way. But now they want to get rid of gas boilers.
I know.
It's ridiculous.
I'm seriously, I will buy myself a gun.
Yeah.
I'm serious. Yeah. No one is taking my gas boiler from
my
me.
cold, dead hands.
End of.
That's it. Julia Hartley-Brewer's in the right old mood this morning. You can tell you what, don't you want to mess with her? It's coming up to 10 o'clock. I'm Mike Graham, back at 6 tomorrow. See you then.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning to you. This is Talk, the home of common sense. Thank you very much indeed for joining me. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer, by the way, in case you were wondering. Whether you're listening on DAB+ radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or on your connected device, it's great to have your company. Great to have the company also of Tom Slater. He's editor of Spiked Online. Good morning to you.
Morning, Julia.
Thank you very much for joining us. Lots to talk about today. I'm with you all the way till 1, but coming up in this hour, going to be focused on a few key stories, and the Archbishop of Canterbury very much in the news, and as always, for all the wrong reasons. Justin Welby is facing growing calls to resign over his handling of a child sex abuse scandal, with a bishop, multiple victims and 3 senior members of the clergy all calling on Welby to quit as the leader of the Church of England. Will he survive the week? I'm questioning whether he will. Plus, terminally ill people with less than 6 months to live could be allowed to take their own lives under the assisted dying bill to be published today. Vote on November the 29th from all MPs in the House. We'll find out how that's going to go. Plus, Keir Starmer is in Azerbaijan, pretty much the only major world leader who is there because he gets this stuff so wrong. But he's going to announce at the COP29 summit today that he plans to hand up to £200 million of your and my money to offshore wind companies to build factories in traditional oil and gas areas. Because, yes, when the wind doesn't blow, don't worry, you won't have any gas or oil either. Well done, everyone. Brilliant plan. Thanks very much. And rather big news last night. Gary Lineker is to quit Match of the Day, a Sun exclusive story. He's going to quit at the end of this season, but he's going to not leave the BBC until the end of the Men's World Cup in 2026. I'd love to hear your thoughts on all of those stories, please. This is Talk. Welcome to the home of common sense. In particular, I want to hear from you about the Archbishop of Canterbury, and I'll give you the number right now. We'll tell you a little bit more about the child sex abuse scandal. It doesn't involve him, doesn't involve Justin Welby doing anything. The story is, as is often the case, the scandal is what he didn't do, what he didn't say in terms of reporting somebody who was a paedophile. So I want to know, should Welby resign? Tell us why you think he should. Tell us why you think he shouldn't. Give us a call, 03444 499 1000. You can text the word TALK to 87222. Get in touch on X at Talk TV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text costs £1 standard network message. Your tweets, of course, are free, as indeed is leaving a message at the bottom of our YouTube page. So I'd love you to get in touch, but feel free to get in touch, as I know you will, about every topic we are talking about today. Tom Slater, coming back to you. Let's just go through a little bit about what the Archbishop of Canterbury story is about. And this is one that's been around for quite a while, and it involves a guy called John Smythe, and he was a KC. Well, he died while he was still a QC. He died in Cape Town in 2018. He was already under investigation by British police. But it turns out, for many, many years, as is often the case, he had been able to access at Christian summer camps for kids numerous, dozens and dozens of young boys and very young men to basically beat viciously with a cane. Boys reported that he actually had a shed in the bottom of his garden which had been soundproof so people couldn't hear the screams of the children. I think that's pretty scary stuff. Sexually abused, viciously beaten. Rumours had gone around, as they always do in church circles, about him for many years. It turns out that among the many people who would have known is the Most Reverend Justin Welby, not then the Archbishop of Canterbury, but that he was aware of concerns, shall we say, about this man John Smythe back in 2013. And a report recently into this entire scandal had basically said, look, if this guy had been exposed earlier, he would have been prevented from carrying on abusing in Britain. He wouldn't have been able to go to South Africa, where he then abused on a grand scale. We've now got 3 members of the General Synod, the Church's legislative body. They set up a petition. We're going to be speaking to one of them later in the show, arguing that he should resign over his handling of the scandal. 7,000 people have signed that now. Should he go?
Well, the pressure certainly seems to be mounting. I mean, it's difficult to know in terms of what he knew when, and that is obviously the crux of this particular
Well, the belief
argument.
is that he actually lied at one point. He did an interview and he actually lied about when he was aware.
And seeming to downplay, not mentioning in particular the fact that even when he was a lay person back in the early 1980s, if memory serves, he had been warned off Smythe, at least told that he was a nasty man and he should stay out of his way. Not necessarily knowing the full extent of what was going on, but that is being kind of hung around his neck as well, perhaps unfairly in his view, but nevertheless it's there. I think it's worth saying that an individual or an organisation, whether it's Justin Welby, the Church of England, what have you, can be inept and terrible at handling very serious allegations like this without being anyway nefarious. Sometimes there's a kind of a light cast on them which can be unforgiving without suggesting that they were covering up or turning a blind eye to abusers. Sometimes people can just be bad at their jobs, can be bad at leading an organisation, can be bad at dealing with the most horrendous kinds of cases like this.
But we've had this problem with popes as well. I mean, lots of focus has been on the Roman Catholic Church over this, but there's also an issue with the Church of England, pretty much every single church. And what's fascinating is actually the statistics show there isn't a higher prevalence of this idea that people go, in church. There isn't a higher prevalence of sex abuse, child sex abusers within religious organisations over others. It's just that they get access to more children. They get into that position of trust, as in people wanting to work in care homes. They want to be around vulnerable children and be in a position of trust where they can basically do what they want and no one will question it. And we saw that with Catholic priests, and we've seen it with the Church of England as well, where concerns are raised about one person, nearly always a man, let's be honest. They're the ones with the positions of power and they're more likely to be paedophiles, and because that's raised. And then even if there is some specific concern, like a child comes forward, parents come forward, the urge is to protect the church as an institution, and we've seen this, whether it's the NHS or any other organisation. You protect the organisation, and then you move them on, and they're moved on to a different parish or told to go and work abroad. Go and abuse kids in Africa or Thailand where we don't have to worry about it. Here's my thing. I can't imagine any scenario where I was aware of someone who was abusing children where I would ever put the organisation I worked for's reputation or indeed my career ahead of safeguarding children. I don't even consider myself to be particularly sort of, moral, selfless person. I'm not even... I just think this is bare minimum humanity. This is bottom level. Are you able to sleep at night humanity? Yeah. So how can someone who has pontificated on migrants, on modern-day slavery, on the homeless, on every single issue, this man takes a moral stance of incredible moral superiority, but not that bothered about a guy who is beating and sexually abusing children within the organisation where he works? That doesn't tally for me. The only people who protect paedophiles are... Oh, who are those people? I wonder who those people are. Because I know who I think those people are. Who do you think those people are? Who would want to protect people who abuse children? Who? And can anyone think? Tom, any ideas?
I wouldn't want to speculate live on air. But what I would definitely say about this is that, as you say, given the kind of moral grandstanding that Justin Welby is engaged in, beyond just, preaching to his flock and trying to spread the good word as he would see it, but getting involved in all these basic kind of virtue signalling issues and campaigns, this casts this, therefore, in an even harsher light for him, partly because there's a sense of, you haven't even got your own house in order in terms of... Even if this isn't about making, covering up for or protecting the church's reputation in a kind of conscious sense, just ineptly handling something like this is obviously a terrible oversight
but again,
in and of itself.
You care about everything else... but not I would say the thing that is the biggest issue for protecting children from sexual and physical abuse. It's got to be pretty high up your priorities. I mean, I'm not familiar with the Ten Commandments. I'm not a Bible reader, but I'm thinking it's probably contained in there somewhere. But there we are. Well, we'll see. I now want to hear from you. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. 0344 499 1000. Should Archbishop Welby resign? Tell us why you think he should. Tell us why you think he shouldn't. I'd really like to hear your thoughts on this. Perhaps you've involved in the church yourself, no involvement in the church, you're pro-church, anti-church. There has been too much cover-up. We've seen it in the Catholic Church as well. We've seen it in virtually every church. Wherever there is a strong structure and there is some morality and this whole idea that you can't speak ill of certain people. Then we see these cover-ups, and it keeps on happening. But I'd love to hear your thoughts as well on that. Also, love to hear your thoughts on our next topic. I want to talk about Gary Lineker. It has just been confirmed while we were speaking in the last couple of minutes by the BBC, the Sun Splash, which was today's paper. They broke the news yesterday evening. Gary Lineker is to step down as host of Match of the Day. He's going to leave at the end of this Premier League football season, but he will continue to host coverage of the FA Cup in 2025-26, but also the World Cup in 2026. You never, it's here in the UK, you never know, guys. It could happen for us. So that news is finally out. Now, there's been a lot of talk about Gary Lineker's role at the BBC. Now, I'm of the view, I love watching him on Match Today. I love, whenever there's oh, good, if I'm going to be watching football for the World Cup or Euros, I would much rather it be on BBC than ITV. Of course, you've got TalkSport coverage, but if you're watching it, and I think Gary Lineker is an absolute pleasure to watch. He gets the tone right. I think he's a really, really good presenter. I mean, he's no Des Lynam. Shouldn't you be at work? If you're old enough to remember that, shouldn't you be? Just the greatest moment of sports television ever. But I just wish he'd stop pontificating. I wish he'd understand you can't work for the BBC and pontificate and moralise about stuff you know nothing about, by the way, on politics. So actually, it's the wrong thing for me. I'd rather he stopped moralising at us, but stayed on the beeb. But what do you think? Was this inevitable?
Potentially. I mean, it seemed like he was on a collision course with the corporation for a long time, because they had a new broom in at the top of the organisation, was very keen to at least be seen to be dealing with the issue of...
You mean Tim Davies?
Absolutely.
They had a new head of sport as well.
Who wanted to be seen to be dealing with this issue of perceived political bias at the BBC, particularly where you had certain personalities who did genuinely operate in a bit of a contractual grey area. They were freelancers, they were able to tweet. Some of them in the politics coverage were still writing newspaper columns and so on, but would be expected in their official duties and roles to be impartial. You then had this issue of sports presenters, and obviously the fact that Gary Lineker became just such a figure in the culture war, really, sounding off like a kind of pound shop Owen Jones about various different things.
I love the idea of being a pound shop Owen Jones. Is Owen Jones a 99p shop? Have they gone now? Are they all pound now because of inflation? I
suppose, yeah, it's probably the £1.50
lands.
And that, you know, and it's a shame in the sense that, you know, he was a tremendous footballer, a tremendous sports broadcaster, and now, unfortunately, it looks like he's going to be focusing full-time on his virtue signalling exploits, which is what I don't think...
Well, there's a lot of talk that actually he wanted to stay on. You know, 1.3 million, you know, that's money nice to find. I wonder whether other broadcasters, you think, you know, the likes of Sky and ITV would want him. I mean, certainly ITV haven't got anyone that good. Who should replace, though? I mean, because you know they're going to go woke. And the obvious thing was Jermaine Jenas. And, of course, he, you know, stop sending messages to women who aren't your wife. Top tip, mate. I mean, I've met the guy, very clever, really good watch, but... You know, he did his own damage to himself there. I don't like people being cancelled for that. Anything consensual, adults not that bothered by personally, but there we are. That's where we are in life now. But you just know that the BBC are going to have to go all PC. You know it's going to end up being a woman, probably a woman of colour, because that's just how they it's irrelevant whether it's someone good or not. It's just that it has to be someone that ticks boxes now. Can't be a white man, not a white straight man.
And what's like particularly unfortunate about that tick that they now have, which is whenever there's a new role that's opened up, they think, right, we have to kind of tick off certain boxes, is that even if and in many cases may well be the case, that the best candidate was someone who also instantly ticked those boxes, that's not going to be at the front of people's minds when they're doing it. And it's really unfortunate across the board that they've embraced that stuff so obviously.
Yep, because they're crazy. I think it's important to stress this. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Gary Lineker leaving the BBC. I mean, not for a year and a half or so, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on that as well. 0344 499 1000. You glad he's going? I actually quite have to keep him on the telly, just get him off Twitter. He's totally entitled to give his views. I'm not for censoring people, except you have to stick to the contract that you signed at the BBC. It says you're not allowed to, while working at the BBC, pontificate on politics, but there we are. I get to do that, but that's in my contract. I'm allowed to do it. Let's also talk about another very important story today, and that is the new assisted dying bill. It's been published. It's a private member's bill. It's the first time that we've actually had a vote in Parliament on this issue since 2015. I would say that MPs have to this day been, frankly, way behind public opinion on this. It would suggest from the opinion polls. But the Labour MP, Kim Leadbeater, this is Jo Cox's sister, she has introduced the bill. In just 2 weeks' time, there'll be a vote in Parliament on this. Lots of people say, oh, it's far too soon. I'm thinking you should already know what your views are on this. And by the way, the idea that MPs scrutinise these bills, I mean, give me a break. They often don't even know what they're voting on that day. But it's no whipping on this. It's a free vote. We know that Keir Starmer voted for assisted dying back in 2015. Wes Street, the Health Secretary, he said he's going to vote against this. He wants more palliative care for people at the end of life. But the crucial thing here is it's not going to be going as far as many other laws in other countries where some bit of saying they've grown and grown, but some of them have grown from a bill similar to this originally. But this is basically going to allow people who are terminally ill with only 6 months to live to be able to take their own lives. They're going to require 2 independent doctors 7 days apart to actually sign off that this person is mentally capable of, definitely does want to die, mentally capable of making that decision, and has only got 6 months to live. And then it must go before 14 days to a judge for a ruling. But then after those 21 days have lapsed, they would be allowed to take their own life. Do you agree with this new measure or not?
No, I fundamentally oppose it for a couple of reasons. I think one of which is that wherever you look, the slippery slope is real to a lesser or greater extent. I mean, if you think about some of the horror stories we've seen coming out of Canada in recent years. They began with a medical assistance in dying programme, as they call it over there, very similar to this. Terminally ill, death reasonably foreseeable. They're now in a situation where they're about to approve MAID access for people who just have chronic mental health problems. So this is something which I think once you kind of cross the line of saying that someone's life could be so wretched, in a sense, as defined by legislation, that they should be able to access assistance in ending their life, I think it's kind of natural that various interest groups, and in some cases activist judges, get involved to try and push the criteria further and further. I also think some of the concerns raised by Wes Streeting, also by Ed Davey, leader of the Liberal Democrats, who is voting against this legislation on a kind of conscience issue, is the fact that in a context in which we have a horrendous health service, palliative care which is really lacking, you do have to ask the question as to whether or not this is as straightforward a choice as some people are making it out to be.
Well, Wes Streeting has said we need to improve palliative care. I'm thinking, if we're going to wait for the NHS to improve, to change laws, good luck with that, I would say. See, I'm very much in favour of this law, and I definitely want safeguards. I would actually expand it. I would allow people with physical disability. I would struggle on the mental disability issue, because, again, I don't think, we've had cases in Europe where you have, a sort of 18-year-old with depression has been allowed to take care of. But the reality is, people do take their own lives. They already do that. And I think a process which makes it gives more of these safeguards is better. And we also know that rich people can go to dignitaries. I want this for my. It sounds terrible. I want this for my own family. I want this for myself. I've been in. I spent a lot of time in my aunt's care home. I have to say, I look at the lives of some people there, worthwhile. Lives of some people there, I would say, not worthwhile, for my judgment. Now, I'm not telling them they should do anything about it. That's up to them. What is worthwhile to one person may not be worthwhile to another. For instance, someone who is unable to physically do anything active, can't feed themselves or anything, they may say that life isn't worthwhile to them. And I think there should be a personal choice. I feel really strongly that I have a right to life and a right to choose my own death.
I mean, the difficulty is it's the fact that it's about the state assisting someone in taking that choice, which brings us into slightly different territory, because it then becomes, here is a list of people and conditions and living standards, shall we say, in which we think it's acceptable for us to help them end their lives. It's almost like, to a certain extent, it's not worth living, and here is everyone else. I think that's a grim distinction that this legislation insists we draw. Also raises the question, doctors aren't infallible.
Oh, we know that.
All kinds
and
of cases
also, the doctors who are very pro this are the ones who are going to get involved with this because you're allowed to excuse yourself if you want to. Look, we haven't even got to COP, or the small matter of Putin possibly threatening nuclear war in Ukraine back in Liz Truss's premiership. We will get to those, though. We also want to get to calls, particularly calls coming in on Justin Welby. But you are so welcome to call in about any of the topics we're talking about. COP29 in Azerbaijan. And do try not to giggle when you say that, by the way. We're going to talk about more about the assisted dying bill. Do you support it or not? What do you make of Gary Lineker quitting the BBC? And, of course, particularly about Justin Welby. Should he go? Should he fall on his sword or not? Love to hear your thoughts on all of that. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. 10:21 is the time. This is Talk.
This Labour disillusioned view that every person send their kids to a private school is bleeding minted is rubbish. My parents scrimped and saved to save me and my brother. That was the decision they made. I think it's disgusting. And more than anything, what it does, apart from double tax people who want to make that commitment, is it's going to force kids out of private schools and back into to comprehensive situations and make worse the problems that Labour are apparently trying to sort out, isn't it?
It's a policy which is bonkers, but also, you know, we need to look around the world. No other country taxes education.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
This is Talk, the home of common sense. I don't know about you, but the conversation about assisted dying certainly carried on in the break here. It's amazing how strongly people feel about it. I wonder if people's personal experience has that impacted on that. Certainly the calls I've taken in the past on this issue, people who've had personal experience with being in care home, working with people at the end of life, maybe, you know, actually pushing people to be very much anti-assisted dying or very pro. It's fascinating how it completely changes. I wonder how much of it's down to your sort of personal perspective on life. I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Do give us a call, 0344 499 1000. Lots and lots of calls and messages coming in about the Archbishop of Canterbury. He's not a man I've held a candle for, I have to say, but whether or not he should resign. There's now a petition, 7,000 people strong, a bishop included, calling for him to resign over his handling of a child sex abuse scandal of a KC and then a QC working within the church, John Smythe, who was accused of abusing at least 130 children. That's just the young teenagers. That's the ones we know about. Beating them and sexually abusing them on a grand scale for many, many years, and able to continue to do so and didn't face justice because people like Justin Welby kind of knew about it and didn't say anything and didn't speak out. Should he go? I think he should. What do you think? Mary says, very high office that requires a high moral rectitude cannot be held by a person of low moral rectitude like Justin Welby. Welby must be removed. Sarah says he needs to be sacked. Why hasn't this already been done? Also needs to be an investigation into what he did know. Also, by the way, who else does he know about and hasn't spoken up about? Cindy says he has to resign. He knew about this man sexually abusing young men and boys and he stayed silent and did nothing. Feels like he's just brushed it under the carpet. So how can he remain in charge of the church when he has no morals? Dean says he's spoken out about issues like migration but fails to speak out about abuse. Very odd morals, he points out. And Finlay says he shouldn't be sacked and investigated. He must have known about the crimes of a psychotic monster that abused little boys. Utter disgrace. Sam says resign. He should be getting a custodial sentence. I'm kind of moving to the point where I think people who know about abuse, who don't do anything about it, your duty of care. I think we have moved to that in some areas where duty of care, if you're the NHS, teacher, care home, if you are suspect abuse, you are required to actually speak up about it. Well, let's go to the phone lines on this. Laura Jane is in Hampshire. Hello, Laura Jane.
Hi.
Hello. What do you want to say?
I think the Archbishop of Canterbury should indeed fall on his sword. As a Roman Catholic, we've had the most terrible scandals in our church, as obviously you know, going way back. And, you know, they've been trying in our church to root it out. And it also horrifies me the way that Justin Welby gets away with all these political discussions that he has. He has no right to comment on political issues.
Well, I mean, everyone in our country is free speech. People have a right to comment on political issues, but we're also right to criticise him when he's a hypocrite on quite a lot of them.
But not as an archbishop. I feel very strongly that the church should stay out of politics.
Yeah, that's true.
And I also feel that bishops and archbishops and whatever should come out of the House of Lords. I think there's no place for them in the House of Lords.
I couldn't agree with you more on that.
I simply don't understand why they're there.
Well, I mean, because we're constitutionally a Christian country, and and that is the reality of why they're there. But I mean, this is the thing. He does pontificate an awful lot of things, and it does appear that he has certainly not been entirely truthful. Let's go that far when asked in the past about what he knew about this man. And we always know it's like what happened, with whether it's Jimmy Savile or whether it's with adult women, with Harvey Weinstein in America. All these stories, like the P. Diddy stuff that's been the news at the moment, the charges he faces, is that it always comes out that everyone's going, oh, well, yeah, everyone knew. Well, everyone knew he was a wrong one. Everyone knew this or that. You think, well, why didn't you say something? I mean, there's a difference between someone not wanting to go public because they don't want to be sued or something, but why haven't you gone to the police? The police won't be sued. You can do that, and people don't do that. Anyone in any major organisation, particularly one of trust like the church, who doesn't prevent abuse by those in the church, I mean, I think they're just as bad as the abuser.
Yeah, as we've seen in the Roman Catholic Church.
Absolutely. I mean, cover up on a grand scale all the way up to the Pope.
Oh, absolutely. Horrendous what went on in Ireland. Absolutely horrendous. It was terrible. The nuns and the baby, adopted. Oh, it just makes me shudder for my church, because obviously I'm a Roman Catholic and I feel ashamed.
Yeah,
very ashamed.
I completely understand. Laura Jane, thank you very much. Actually, I've got a very good friend. I went to her wedding in a Catholic church, a priest that she'd known since she was a child, and then she found out subsequently that he'd been a paedophile and he'd abused, and she lost her faith. She said she couldn't believe this man that she'd known and trusted, and from childhood to marrying her. And God, he gave a great sermon, and turns out, he was a very wrong one. Audrey is in Dorset. Hello, Audrey. What do you want to say?
Well, first of all, I feel horrified on behalf of the lads that Smy's abused.
Yeah.
But more to another point is surely Welby is a spiritual advisor to King Charles.
Good point. That's one of his roles, isn't it? Yes, who of course is technically the head of the church.
Yes. I mean, he can't really have contact with him now. Surely I'm all for him being sacked.
Do you think? I don't think. Is there a route by which he can be sacked, or is it just?
I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think he has to basically fall on his sword.
Well, if enough people condemn him, shun him, I think he'll be left.
Yeah. I think when you've got bishops speaking out, not just reverends, but bishops in this petition, it does appear that, yes, I think, again, he's put his head above the parapet on all these moral issues. Well, you know what? You want to make darn sure that you are moral throughout, don't you? Audrey, thank you very much. Tom Slater from Spike Online still with me. That's an interesting point, isn't he? That, look, neither you nor I are, I think, religious or actually big monarchy fans. But, if you have a role, you're the leading bishop, archbishop in a church, and you're also the spiritual advisor to the head of the church, the king, that comes with it various moral duties.
No, absolutely. And it's that point at which you just kind of cannot carry on leading a particular organisation, particularly one which is so woven into the fabric of the state and the constitution in this country. Yeah. It puts it on an entirely different level of scrutiny and expectation as to how you're going to.
Absolutely. Well, look, we're going to be talking to former Anglican Bishop Gavin Ashenden about this. He's former chaplain to the Queen, actually. I'll get his thoughts on this in just a couple of moments. Do you still want to get your calls on this? 0344 499 1000. Also, your thoughts on the assisted dying bill. It's just been published. And Gary Lineker leaving Match of the Day and leaving the BBC in a year or so as well. Love to hear your thoughts on that. And if you want to give your tuppence worth on Keir Starmer and Ed Miliband at the hilarious climate summit in the oil-rich capital of Azerbaijan. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that too. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. This is Talk.
smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning to you. 10:35 is the time. This is Talk with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Tom Slater, editor of Spiked Online, still with me. Delighted to welcome now Gavin Ashenden to the show. He's a former Anglican bishop and a former priest of the Church of England, and indeed former chaplain to the late Queen. Good morning to you, Gavin.
Julia, hi, good morning.
Thank you very much indeed for joining us. So where are you on this big debate of the Archbishop of Canterbury will be facing these calls to resign over failure to act, failure to speak out, when it's now clear that he would have known, and reports have suggested very clearly he would have known about a prolific child abuser in John Smythe, who went on to die in South Africa, moving from abusing in Britain to abusing South Africa. No one stopped him because people like Justin Welby didn't speak out. Should he go?
Yes, I've been working with and sympathetic to some of the victims for quite some time, and I'm one of the people who's been furious and despairing about the intransigence of the hierarchy. There were 3 periods of failure for Welby, and the press hasn't got them all quite accurately, but it's important, I think, we do. The first was in the 70s and 80s, when he was part of the system, and that's the point where we think he couldn't have failed to have heard something, and therefore should have been on high alert.
So there were rumours about John Smythe in particular?
Absolutely. And there are people saying, we overheard Welby being warned off Smythe in a grave conversation. They've testified to it. It's clear he knew something. That means that when he became Archbishop in 2013 and was given a report 4 years before Smythe's death, explaining that that's the point at which he should energetically leapt into clearing this thing up. But actually, it seems like people get too posh to care at times. And his office, his chaplain, they didn't bother. And the problem is, if you're a victim and you phone up the headquarters and say, look, please pay attention. I'm not the only one. This really matters. And it's been under the wraps for 30 years. Do something, please. And then they lose it. Welby appears to have either lied or there's an interview he had on LBC in 2017 when he said, well, we haven't done anything because we've told the police about it. The police are dealing with it. That wasn't true. The police weren't dealing with it. And again, that was one of those moments where everything got stuck in institutional incompetence. The next period was 2017 to today. It's taken 5 years to get this Makin report into the public domain. And during this time, some of the victims who are my age and were beaten up when they were 16 and 15, they've died. And Smythe has died. It took Channel 4 to bring this out into the open. It's just the level of laziness, carelessness, unkindness is off the scale. Of course he should go. And
especially when we know what happened in the Roman Catholic Church, and again, cover up, and it's sort of like, and again, this has happened in the Church of England as well, not so well publicised, where suspected child abuse or even, very proven child abuse, and priests and vicars or whatever, they kind of just moved along to a different parish or allowed to go abroad without police action. And the failure again and again for organisations like the churches to not report people to the police, sort of keep it in-house, keep it hush-hush, because of the concern, we believe, about the institution itself and its reputation. But I mean, more concerned about the reputation of a wealthy church than concerned about the safety of children. You've got to question people's morality at that point.
Well, it's not only immoral, it's really stupid. Because there used to be a culture when I was growing up, when a head of a department in the government, if the department had screwed up, would take responsibility and say, the only way I can restore trust is if I go. I'll pay the price. Actually, it wasn't completely my fault, but I've had the perks of being in charge of this, so I will pay. That's what happens when you take responsibility. In this case, not only is Welby the head of the institution, but he was personally at fault. It is so immoral to say I'm going to cling on here because I don't think I was sufficiently at fault. I'm afraid too that at fault at the moment are the bishops in the Church of England. One of them, a brave woman bishop in Newcastle, has broken ranks and said yes, he must go. The rest are sitting there silently on their hands, colluding with with what's obviously a memo from Central Office saying don't do anything to rock the boat. They should be rocking the boat and rocking it hard today as a matter of integrity and honour, or how can we believe in any of them?
Well, indeed, I mean, we've got a petition, 7,000 people have signed this, and people within the Synod, General Synod, but you mentioned, the Right Reverend Dr. Helen Ann Hartley is the first bishop to call for him to go. Do you think there will be more bishops who do speak out?
Well, it depends how cowardly they are. I mean, at the moment, they've kept their silence. I'm hoping that he'll be advised his position is untenable by the end of the day and that he'll go. Yes. But frankly, I'm quite as disappointed with the people that he's appointed who are just sitting there keeping mum. None of them are saying he should either go or he shouldn't go. They're a crave institutionally driven silence. And this suggests that the Church of England is rotten beyond Welby himself, and other people will have to take responsibility.
Well, that's it. And this is what we've just been discussing, is because, the idea that you'd ever put your institution or your career above the safety of children, when we know about the abuse of the grand scale, and we've to have so many people come forward over the last couple of decades to say what happened to them and speaking publicly about it, and the extraordinary damage it has done to their lives. Many taken their lives because of the shame and the trauma.
Right. Yeah.
It is untenable, I think, to most moral people that they would not speak out, and to cover it up. And not reporting it to the police and not investigating yourself, that's covering it up. It is morally untenable, especially from a man who prides himself on apparently being so moral and talks about modern-day slavery, talks about migration, talks about the homeless, chides Conservative governments. I wonder when he's going to be chiding the Labour government. I don't know. Difficult to guess his politics, she lied, about anything they do wrong. And yet happy to carry on in his job, knowing that he failed to act. And there will have been children in South Africa. I guess we don't care about them, but children in South Africa who will have been abused by this man, who would have been prevented from being victims.
One of them was probably killed. This man was arrested by the Zimbabwean police because a 16-year-old was found naked in his pool and charged with culpable homicide. They couldn't make it stick. He fled to South Africa. Everyone knew about this.
It wasn't just sex abuse, was it? He beat these children with canes. He on an extraordinary scale. Children, would be passing out from the beatings.
It was a very weird and violent form of sadism, and once again, which means you can be fairly sure people talked about it.
Yeah.
It was at such a level of abuse that we all know what organisations are like. Things get out.
Yeah.
I'm afraid I don't believe Welby when he says he didn't know anything about it in 2013. But even if he didn't, anybody taking on that responsibility
should have been looking into it. Yeah,
with enormous energy.
Can I ask you finally this, as a former chaplain to the late Queen Elizabeth, a point just made by a caller, Audrey. She's just pointed out, this man in his role is not just head of the church; he's also officially the King's spiritual advisor. Do you think just on those grounds alone, he can't be a spiritual advisor to the King?
I'm very much hoping that there'll be people in the palace who will be speaking to both the Prime Minister and the Archbishop's office, saying you are causing embarrassment more widely than your own institution. And you need not to think only of yourself as you have been, but there are others you need to think of in terms of your constitutional responsibility. It's just another reason why the idea that he can stay is so ludicrous and part of his own moral myopia.
Do you think that he doesn't last the week?
I hope he won't last the day.
Really interesting to talk to you, Gavin Ashton. Thank you so much for joining us, former chaplain to the Queen, former Anglican bishop as well. Tom Slater, your thoughts on that?
Well, I think it just shows kind of how much this is the sort of crunch point. This has been a story which has been building for so long, since he came, actually into post in 2013, but particularly that 2017 array of reports by Channel 4 and The Telegraph and so on. This has been going on for so long now. That now is the kind of point in which some sort of decision is going to have to be made one way or the other. So I agree. I think it's something that we could be talking about hours rather than days or weeks.
Well, indeed. Well, again, we shall see. We'll keep you posted. If there's any development on Justin Welby leaving today, that job. We'll see what happens there. But we certainly do know, and it's been confirmed by the BBC in the last half hour, one man who is going to be leaving his job is Gary Lineker. We're going to be talking about Gary Lineker leading Match the Day and eventually the BBC by 2026. Up next with Roger Bolton, a former BBC executive. Do you want him to go? Are you glad he's going? Or actually, you're going to miss him on Match of the Day? Bring back Des Lynam, I say. This is Talk, the home of common sense.
This Labour disillusioned view that every person that send their kids to a private school is bleeding minted is rubbish. My parents scrimped and saved to save me and my brother. That was the decision they made. I think it's disgusting. And more than anything, what it does, apart from double tax people who want to make that commitment, is it's going to force kids out of private schools and back into to comprehensive situations and make worse the problems that Labour are apparently trying to sort out, isn't it?
It's a policy which is bonkers, but also, you know, we need to look around the world. No other country taxes education.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning to you. This is Talk, the home of common sense. Thank you very much indeed for joining me. So much to talk about today. We're talking about the Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby, facing growing calls to resign over his handling of a child sex abuse scandal, which he didn't speak up about, may well have lied about what he knew. Give us a call. Should he go or should he not? 0344 499 1000. Your thoughts also on, of course, the assisted dying bill that's being published. Does it go not far enough, too far? Should we not have assisted dying at all? I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. A lot of big moral issues today, but also the big issue a lot of people are talking about is Gary Lineker, presenter of Match of the Day, of course, and all the BBC World Cup and Euros coverage. He is, we now know, is going to quit Match of the Day at the end of this season. He's going to carry on presenting FA Cup matches and then the 2026 World Cup coverage, and then that is it. It is over. So why has he gone? Why are they not offering him more money? It looks like he wanted to stay on, but they didn't want to renew his £1.3 million contract. Well, let's talk about this with Roger Bolton. He's a former BBC executive and host of the Beeb Watch podcast. Good morning to you, Roger.
Good morning, Julia.
Lovely to speak to you. Do you think this was always going to be going to happen? Do you think that it was inevitable with all the fuss about Gary Lineker being in the news often for the wrong reasons, that he was going to eventually leave the BBC? Do you think this is mutual?
I mean, I thought it was inevitable. I'm not sure how mutual it was. I think my impression is that Gary Lineker would have liked to stay on a little longer, perhaps continue doing Match of the Day next season, so it comes to a full stop at the World Cup. But the background to this is two key things. One is the BBC has lost in the last 15 years, according to the Voice of the Listener and Viewer, 40% of its income in real terms, spending power. And it's continuing to make cuts. It's going to continue, the next year or so. So when you're paying a man the amount of money you are like that, it's very difficult to turn to staff and say you're unemployed. So they were going to have to reduce what he got paid very, very, very considerably. The second thing is the social media guidelines. I mean, he broke them. It was embarrassing for the BBC. The BBC is now going to go into its charter renewal. It doesn't want to have to deal with problems with politicians over anything other than its future existence and funding. So you put those two things together.
Just made life easier for him not to be there. I mean, look, he was on 1.3 million of the fees we actually know for presenters, because some of them, of course, are hidden in different ways of paying people. He was the highest paid presenter. I suspect not actually overall the highest paid presenter. But you know what? I mean, he was still is a very, very, very good presenter of football matches. I love watching him on telly. I just think his views are rather ignorant and a bit silly. Although I don't want him to not have his views. It's just that when other people at the BBC, and I know lots of people who work there, are just saying, well, we're not allowed to tweet stuff like that. We'd lose our job. Why is he allowed? Why are the rules specially bent around him? And we know after the time when he did get taken off air and all the other presenters refused to go on to back him up, he extraordinarily was allowed back on air, and it appeared that the social media rules had been bent so that Gary Lineker was allowed to do whatever he wanted.
Well, not in the end. I mean, it was very difficult and embarrassing, but look, the facts are he's going to stop at the end of the season. I think the problem with social media, on the one hand, Gary's got a bigger career. He'll continue. He's got businesses. He's a very successful businessman. Other organisations will, want him. The problem always with the BBC is, do you try and match the market? Or do you say, no, people have got to take a big discount because they're working for the BBC? Yeah. And it's always difficult in between. You obviously believe in the market, but then the BBC's half in and half out the market. Yeah. So how you negotiate this is very difficult.
Well, no, I believe in the market, but the key thing is, and I know this from things like, the after-dinner speaking circuit, which I used to be on, is that, if you're on the BBC, you get offered tons of that work, and I think they're actually making it harder for some of them to do it. But you become a household name. But you become a household name in a different way when you work for the Beeb. That's what a lot of them play on.
Yeah, but on the other hand, people will say they're paying the licence fee, we want the best presenter. I mean, what happened, if you look at BBC sports coverage over the last few years, it doesn't do cricket anymore, it doesn't do rugby anymore. Yeah. I mean, it's under real pressure. Now, that's fine in some ways, you should say. It's been provided elsewhere, though people will have to pay a lot of money for it. The BBC should concentrate on minority sports, if you like, women's sports and so on, which they do. But soccer, they've always thought we've got to hold on to soccer, whatever happens, and hold on to the Match of the Day as much as we can. If we lose that, we are in real trouble. And so against that, can you continue to pay Gary Lineker 1.3 million? Yeah. I mean, let me just say, I think he's a brilliant presenter.
Yeah, that's what I think. That said, there is an element where you can say, Des Lynam before him, another brilliant presenter, as we know, much loved. He moved to ITV for the big money. Didn't take the audience with him, and that's what's fascinating, is actually people are going to watch Match of the Day if they want to watch Match of the Day, and they don't really care, unless it's someone they absolutely hate, who's presenting it. The fascinating thing is who will be the next presenter, because the BBC they're very big on ticking boxes, and another white, straight male they might think is a problem for them, despite the fact that most of the presenters and pundits on football are, funnily enough, white, straight males.
Are you auditioning, Julia, for the job?
I mean, genuinely, I could probably manage 30 seconds of bluffing my way through. My lovely audience had to put up with 5.5 years when I was on The Breakfast Show doing a sports update every day, trying to make it look like I had a vague idea what I was talking about, only just, I think, vaguely muddled through most days.
Well, there are lots of candidates who can do the job, and they'll do the job very well, whether they have that star appeal. But, I mean, Gary, when he started, was a bit halting, but became brilliant. My suspicion is they'll appoint from probably within. But you never know. They've got a new director of sport, and people who come in from the outside like to make headline-grabbing appointments, so you can't be sure. Whoever they choose will do a good job, but we'll all miss Gary.
Do you think, though, that the rules on social media and pontificating often about things which clearly Gary Lineker knows very little about, but blatantly criticising the government, I mean, comparing migrant policy to Nazi 1930s Germany, for goodness sake, things like that. Do you think that it's going to be very clear now, there are going to be no exceptions? You sign up to the deal. If you want to work at the Beeb, you've got to keep stum on your political views. That's part of the deal.
Well, it depends who you are. If you work for BBC News and Current Affairs, and if you work for the BBC staff, or if you're a permanent employee of the BBC and you're not employed elsewhere, yes. The problem gets difficult when you have people who work for other organisations, and they're going to say, because I appear on the BBC maybe once a week, I can't talk to anybody what I think. It gets very mucky, but certainly this will indicate that if anybody really wants to go on social media and be political, their future may be at risk.
Yeah, very interesting. Roger Bolton, former BBC executive, host of the Beeb Watch podcast. Thank you very much indeed for that. Tom Slater, you know, I've got to be honest. I mean, I'm not a match of the day fan, although I always watch, you know, the World Cup and Euro matches. But you know, I'll watch it whichever. The matches are often on different channels apart from the finals. You know, in which case, you know, you watch it on ITV. It's on ITV. And if you're in the car, you listen on Talk Sport. You know, you watch it. Whereas, is there an element where actually these big name stars don't actually attract the viewers that often people think they do?
I think that's often been proven to be the case when someone kind of steps down. They think, how are we going to ever recover from this? But if the strength of the brand is strong enough, and it's had several kind of so many dynasties now. In terms
what happened to
that,
Natasha Kaplinsky, you might ask?
This is the thing, and I think people might be surprised to see how readily he is replaced. But that's not to say that it wasn't, you know, a tremendous run that he had, and it's just a bit of a shame, I suppose, that in so many people's minds he's become associated with just the most sixth formerish bloviating on social media rather than what he's actually very, very good at.
And it is funny when people make I do find it's one of the things that I find hilarious about the BBC, especially, you know, some of these long-standing sort of Radio 2 presenters as well, who bleat on about, I've been working here for 40 years, I can't believe they're getting rid of me. You're 75! Get over yourself, give someone else a chance. I mean, he's been at the BBC for 30, well, he will have been when he leaves in 2026. He'd been at the Beeb for 30 years. That's a good run. Most people in this industry don't last that long.
And it's one of those things where also internally you often get the sense whenever there is a scandal or even a kind of pay dispute, or the how much people are earning at the top end comes out into the media as it does every year, where there's a lot of people internally who are facing, you know, cuts, they're having to reapply for their jobs, seeing someone, you know, feeling that they've been hard done by, or people mourning the loss of a presenter who was paid more than, you know, hundreds and hundreds of these people.
The thing is, I don't have an issue with his pay. I actually really don't. He's a star. He was captain of England. I mean, he's still scored the most goals in a World Cup for England. I'm sorry, the guy's got credit. He just knows nothing about politics, but thinks he does. I mean, I'm sure he's a great businessman. I like Walker's crisps.
Another string to his bow.
I mean, another string to his bow. I mean, you know, I've got no issue. My issue with, and I don't mind him. I don't mind ignorant people giving their views on politics. Absolutely. That's part of free speech. That's entitled. What you're not allowed to do is sign a contract with a national organisation that everyone is forced by threat of going to prison to pay for, and then which says you can work for us, but you cannot give your political views. And you sign that contract, you deal with that, and then you don't get to go and break those rules and then go, oh, poor little me, I don't get to have the rules which everyone else at the BBC has to abide by.
And that's another thing that people, I'm sure, feel a hell of a lot of resentment about, as you talked about yourself. But in a way, I do sort of just wish that his legacy would be about what he's really good at rather than all these other things. But
absolutely, hanging around the goal. I'm old enough to know that's certainly for sure. I'd love to hear your thoughts on Gary Lineker leaving the BBC, leaving Match today. Who do you want to replace? I'm telling you, it's going to be a black woman. I just know this. One-legged, never played football. You know, I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Give us a call 0344 499 1000. Your thoughts on Justin Welby. Should he stay or should he go? And on assisted dying, there is lots to talk about today. Up next, the wonderful, the brilliant Craig McKinley, Conservative peer. This is Talk. We are, of course, as you already know, the home of common sense.
DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning to you once again. Welcome back to the show. This is Talk, the home of common sense, with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer, with you all the way until 1 o'clock. We've got an absolutely packed show, already been packed for the last hour. Great to have you join us, whether you're listening on DAB+ radio or on your smart speaker, watching on YouTube or on your connected device. Thank you very much for your company. Thank you also, of course, to Tom Slater, editor of Spiked Online, who is joining us today as well. Lots of heated debates today. Coming up, we are going to be talking about Keir Starmer. He's announcing at the COP29 summit, that's the UN Climate Change Summit, being held in a major oil-producing country in Azerbaijan. You've got to see the funny side, folks. He's announcing today that he plans to hand up to £200 million of your and my money to offshore wind companies to build factories in what would normally be traditional oil and gas production areas, because, of course, that will really help us, won't it, keep the lights on and the heating on this winter. Deep sighs. Also getting more of your calls, lots of calls coming in about the Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby. He's facing growing calls to resign over his handling of a child sex abuse scandal, with a bishop, multiple victims of the abuser and 3 senior members of the clergy calling for Welby to quit as the leader of the Church of England. Will he last the day? And one of the founders of the world's oldest breastfeeding support charity has quit in protest at the decision to include transgender women in their policies. When they say transgender women, of course, what they mean is men who think that they are women and think that they can healthily breastfeed their child, which, of course, they can't because they're men. Just want to clarify that. Anyone who's a bit slow at the back of the class there. Anyway, we'll talk about all of that. Do keep your calls coming in about the Archbishop of Canterbury. Should Welby resign? Tell us why he should. Tell us why you think he shouldn't. I'd love to hear from you if you think, no, he shouldn't go. He's the man to clear up the church. I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. You can also give us a call on assisted dying. The new assisted dying bill has been published. We'll get to more detail on that. Love to hear your thoughts on whether you'd be voting for or against if you were an MP, given the choice. Also, Gary Lineker leaving the BBC. Are you glad he's going to be going? Will you miss him on Match of the Day? Will you miss him during World Cups? Love to hear your thoughts on that as well. Number for all those topics, 0344 499 1000. You can text us on 87222. Get in touch on X or Twitter at Talk TV. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text costs £1, standard network rate message. Messages at the bottom of our YouTube page are free, as of course our messages on X as well. Tom Slater, before we go to our first guest, just very briefly, you and I were discussing Archbishop of Canterbury a bit earlier. We didn't get to COP29. The gloriously chosen place for it to be in Baku, the capital of Azerbaijan, a major, entirely funded pretty much the country by its oil and gas production. It's the, as we can guess from the name, 29th attempt to save the planet and save humanity and whatever else Greta thinks we should be hysterical about this week. Oh, Gaza, that's her latest thing. But we've got all these various pledges. But what is fascinating, the only pretty much major world leader who's attending is Keir Starmer. He's flown there yesterday. He's making speeches today alongside Ed Miliband, our energy security or net zero secretary, because you can't have both. But one of the things we're going to hear from Starmer, he's given a press conference just an hour ago. No, he's giving it now, I believe, in the next few moments. He's going to pledge £200 million to offshore wind companies to build factories in oil and gas zones. Of course, you need oil and gas to back up when the wind doesn't blow and, of course, the sun doesn't shine for solar panels. What do you make of this?
Well, I think it's just such a farce, isn't it? And the only people who don't seem to realise it is a farce are people like Keir Starmer, who's going along to these conferences even when no other big world leaders are. I mean, these things are great for the kind of green energy industry where they can go and cut deals and enrich themselves. These things are also great for the fossil fuel industries because you often see, as we saw in the run-up to this particular conference, even some of the organisers in some of these countries using them as an opportunity to try and gin up interest in their own domestic fossil fuel production. So they know it's a joke, but a lot of the kind of virtue signalling Western leaders aren't in on it, it seems like.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. And they really do think it's a joke. Yeah, we're still world leaders, and apparently we are inspiring the rest of the world. And certainly with Donald Trump's arrival in the White House on next January, things are going to change big time, are they not? Well, let's talk about this with Lord McKinley. Craig McKinley, of course, was an MP of the Conservatives, now a Conservative pit, and I'm delighted to say joins us right now. Good morning to you. Can you hear us? Craig McKinley, hello. Craig.
Hello, can you hear me? I've got a bit of reception problems at this end.
Oh, right. Okay. I don't know if we can see... Oh, we can see you now. We can hear you. Hopefully this will continue. Now, Craig, you, of course, were part of the net zero scrutiny group of MPs in the House of Commons, and there was very little scrutiny, as you and I have discussed many, many times over the years, of the net zero policies when they were put into place, signed in, and, I think a Conservative government may have been involved in a lot of that. Certainly the chosen 2050 target, and then the 2035, then the 2030 targets, various different parties. None of this has actually had any proper scrutiny about whether it was achievable, whether it was affordable, whether or not it was desirable. I would say none of those three things. But what do you make of the Prime Minister jetting off as pretty much the only major world leader? China, India, France, Germany, the EU, America, none of them are there. Jetting off to an oil-producing country in Azerbaijan to attend an eco-summit to spend more of your and my taxpayers' money.
Yes, COP29. In an oil-producing state, COP28 in the UAE. It's quite comical, really. The big three CO2 outputters, India, China and the US, none of their heads of state are going. And I can be pretty sure that the new head of state in the US won't be going to COP30. I think that's pretty much guaranteed. Do you know...
They should hold it in Texas. It would be really good fun.
Well, you know, the fact that it goes to oil-producing areas, yes, perhaps it would be in Texas next year. But can you believe, Julia, 80,000 people turn up to these annual jamborees? 80,000 people. I mean, that's the size of a pretty good-sized town.
Yeah.
I don't know what the hell they do. They obviously must consume a vast amount of energy doing whatever they're talking.
Absolutely. You cut out for a second there.
A lot of them turn up by private jet.
Oh, we know. We know they do that because at Glasgow, COP26, they all did that as well. But by the way, apparently 80,000 last year in Dubai, only about 40,000 this year. It's interesting. Already people have gone, yeah, I'm not sure this is the show to be on anymore. And this is the thing. Sorry, we've got a bit of a delay there, Craig. Sorry.
I was just thinking about what Keir Starmer's just announced. 200 million for some God knows what new factories on oil platforms. I don't really know what that means, frankly. But then on the other hand, for the sake of, dare I say, a mere 500 million, he's going to destroy the fabric of this nation by taxing farmers. I mean, these two things just don't hang well together. You'll have the rest of the world, the developing nations, I expect they're there in good numbers, will be demanding $1 trillion, apparently.
Yeah. A year
in some sort of reparations for what I'm really not sure. I would say a very good advice to a Prime Minister: don't go to COPs and don't go to heads of government for the Commonwealth nations, because it just seems you're being asked to be tucked up with taxpayers' money.
Well, absolutely.
No, the whole thing is a fiasco. I think it's time that we turned a page on all of this nonsense. And the very fact that Ed Miliband in there should just make us rather fearful, I would have thought, because we are going to win the net zero race, because there'll be nobody else in it. Everybody else will have given up rather sensibly.
This is a very, very fair point. I mean, Ed Miliband is still, it's like a sort of a 6-year-old kid getting so excited about this. I saw an interview with him this morning where Ed Miliband said that, they had an independent report from NESE, the sort of National Energy Security Body or something, and he's saying it's an independent report and they're saying that they can push on with it. Actually, read the report, it doesn't actually give a full thumbs up to it, because it's talking about sort of 90% achievable, some of his aims, and that last 10% is the difficult bit. But crucially, it's not an independent report because this body has only one shareholder. Who is that shareholder? Oh, Ed Miliband, the Energy Secretary, himself personally.
Can I tell you what happened last week, Julia? We had that wonderful German word, Dunkelflaute, was across the whole of Northern Europe and the UK. We lived through it. I lived through it last week. It was no wind, and it was this murky grey. So we had virtually zero output from wind farms, and we had virtually zero output from solar panels. So that in itself should have shown you something, that this really doesn't work, does it? Because if you're going to rely on renewables, and so Ed Miliband says we're going to do that ever more quickly at ever more cost to the taxpayer, how are you actually going to keep the lights on? Yeah. And do you know why? Because we'll all be forced to have smart meters, and will be charged colossal amounts of money dare we put on the kettle at between 5 and 7 in the evening. There will be dynamic pricing. And that's one of the reasons when my supplier, very happy with them actually, Octopus, I think they're a good company. But I keep getting these emails saying, you need to have a smart energy meter. And I keep saying, no, I don't, and I won't. Thank you very much.
I'm with you all the way, and I've warned everyone I know, and I warn everyone on the show regularly about this. I might get an email virtually every week saying, well, you have to come and fit a smart meter. No, you don't. You're not doing one over my dead body. I do explain to people. Ed Miliband, again, he talks about this all the time, how it's going to be absolutely brilliant because we can have, different kind of surge pricing, and so we can have it cheaper at different times, and people can then know they can put the dishwasher or the washing machine on, and it will cost them less. You go, hold on a minute. If it costs people less at certain times, that by definition means it costs people more at certain times. And people like him, who, by the way, has 2 kitchens with 2 dishwashers in his house in North London, don't have to worry about when they put the kettle on or do the laundry because they can afford it either way. What they're saying is basically, if you're on low income, we're going to ration your energy. Now, if we really want to worry about poorer people on lower incomes who are struggling with their finances, energy, wouldn't it make more sense to have really, really cheap, reliable, secure energy that people didn't have to worry about their bills at all?
Well, it's funny, we're completely breaking capitalism. I've lost faith that we are still a capitalist country. We're actually not anymore. Because capitalist countries, if somebody wants to buy it, you will usually find that it's produced at the lowest cost and there's plenty of it. That's what capitalism does. It's a beautiful system, as Trump might say. But we've gone way past that now. It no longer works. And we're in this bizarre situation where the price is controlled. And, don't trust me on these things, Julia. Let's just trust some facts. There are 2 countries in the world that have got the most renewables. That's us and Denmark. Denmark are actually a little bit ahead of us. And guess what? Danish electricity prices are a bit more expensive than the UK. So don't trust me. Trust your bill when you open it.
And indeed, our energy bills,
highest price in the world.
Our energy bills are among the very, very highest in the world. And again, in lots of countries, that even under Joe Biden, under the Democrats, the last 4 years, America's talked a good game on climate, but actually they've become the biggest oil and gas producer in the world. And thank God they have, because when we saw the Putin invasion of Ukraine, and we had the sanctions on Russian oil and gas, thank God we were able to get our liquefied natural gas from America, which is we don't get our gas from tyrants anymore, as Ed Miliband claims. We get it from our Western allies who've got the sense to do the fracking and do the drilling.
He'll probably claim. Trouble is, Julia, with Donald Trump on the throne in the US, I expect Ed Miliband will claim that we're getting our gas from tyrants.
Well, I wanted to ask you what you made of Donald Trump taking over in the States. He'll be in power on January the 20th. We know that he says that climate change is a hoax. He's very, very, very keen on dropping all the net zero stuff. He's going to withdraw, as he did last time around, from the Paris Agreement on climate change. It seems to me that pretty much every country is not saying it but quietly withdrawing from it, because they are realising, even in Germany and France, they are facing up to the reality that their publics will not put up with the abject nonsense of higher taxes and higher prices while they get poorer. It's just not going to, and industry collapses and jobs collapse. It's just not going to fly anymore. You and I have been saying for years, this stuff doesn't survive a by-election, for God's sake. And when people actually get a choice on it, they vote against it. But this is a concern of the metropolitan elite with their second car as an eco car because they can afford 2 cars. You know who those people are. I know what those people are. And frankly, I despise is a strong word, but yes, I do despise a lot of those people on this front. But what do you think is going to change for us in Britain, and indeed much of the Western world, that pays lip service to a lot of this net zero stuff, and countries like ours which are fully imbued in it, from Donald Trump taking over in America?
Well, Trump has come to that very easy and inescapable conclusion that cheap energy means that your industry has a chance to actually compete.
Yeah.
I mean, we can't compete with Chinese energy prices, for instance, because it has its output backed on coal. China has a lot of coal, it can import a lot of coal, and guess what? It burns a lot of coal and builds a new power station every week or 2. And let me give you this as the biggest madness that I've heard so far. A few weeks ago, Ed Miliband said he wants to spend 22 billion of our money and hoping for another 8 billion of private money. So that's 30 billion pounds, money that could do something pretty useful, like rebuild industry, infrastructure, or something else that you might think is useful. But no, 30 billion of money to sequestrate 8 million tonnes of CO2 a year, a technology that, no, doesn't actually exist quite yet. But say we did hit that holy grail of being able to put 8 million tonnes of CO2 down a year. That's 8 million out of Britain's 400 million tonnes, so a pretty small proportion.
It's laughable.
And a very small proportion of the global 40 billion tonnes. But say it's all possible. That 8 million tonnes at 30 billion pounds represents one coal-powered power station that China is building every week. Now, that should put into some context the madness of all this. Donald Trump, not surprisingly, has said, yahoo to that. It is a nonsense. It doesn't stack up. And I'm sure the US will be going up the route that we should be going down, a route that I've recommended for years. We go for domestic gas and oil as the interim fuel as we roll out nuclear reactors, and especially small modular reactors. And we don't need one-off built Bentley reactors like we're building. We want lots of Model T Ford small modular reactors. If you want to get to net zero, that is the way to do it. But I think on the way, we've got to have a bit of a reality check now and say Britain's 1% out of global CO2. The rest of them aren't bothering. Why are we completely destroying British industry, making our bills some of the highest in the world, and making the poorest suffer the very most? It's certainly not conservative. I would actually guess it's not very socialist either. Perhaps we will wake up to this madness. And do you know what? Ed Miliband's really rapid route to this type of lunacy might actually be the jaunt we need, because, as I've said many times, at some time the lights will go out and we'll wonder why.
Absolutely. Craig McKinley, Lorne McKinley, Conservative peer, thank you very much indeed. He led the net zero scrutiny group in the Commons when he was an MP. Tom Slater, I mean, it is absolutely extraordinary, isn't it? Because the plan is by 2030 we have completely clean energy. Well, a lot of people say clean energy. No, it's clean electricity, which is only 20% of our energy needs. We'll still need gas and everything else. There's no chance at all of gas and oil being... Next 100 years we'll still be using gas and oil. Anyone who thinks anything different is, frankly, insane, and certifiably so. But he reckons that we are going to eliminate all gas from the electricity grid by 2030. I mean, we're not. And if he does actually try and do that, it will mean blackouts. Do you think that we need to get to the point where we actually have the blackouts? We actually get to the point where people literally... I mean, I think this winter, with the winter fuel allowance as well, we're actually going to have more people dying because they're afraid of putting the heating on. We've had the last 3 years of big bills. Do you think that we actually need to get to that point before people actually wake up and realise this is not just some sort of do-goodism? This is genuinely a dangerous, immoral and insane policy.
And we've come very close to blackouts in recent years. The only thing that has saved us is importing energy at an incredibly expensive cost, or in some cases turning on a coal-fired power station at the last minute. Which we won't be able to do anymore. Absolutely. So I hope it doesn't get to that. But this is also a failure of leadership from the top, because the issues have been kind of masked by the fact that people could just see energy bills creeping up, but that could be blamed away on all kinds of different issues. But the fundamental point of all of this is that you cannot have a situation in which people will be expected to put up with having less, paying more for less, energy becoming more and more expensive. That's just not been part of the deal. Electorally, you're trying to push water uphill by doing that.
But also the idea that in a first world country in 2024 or any point in the next 20 years, the idea that people should be told, yes, we're going to give you a special rate so you can afford to put your washing machine on. I mean, I'm sorry, you what?
No, it's embarrassing.
I mean, it is embarrassing.
It's a sign that they've just given up on prosperity.
You're poor. You can do your washing after midnight. Aren't you lucky? Because you can't afford to do it before midnight. Ed Miliband can, with his 2 kitchens and his 2 washing machines and his 2 dishwashers. I mean, I'm sorry. This is again. It's like the cities 40 thing that Sadiq Khan, all the mayors are signed up to, which basically wants 15-minute cities. You're not allowed to go anywhere out of your own zone. You couldn't drive there. Only allowed 1 flight. Most families only allowed 1 international flight a year.
Outfits.
Yeah, a couple of new outfits. No, it's you're joking.
No,
it's actually one flight a year. They'll still be flying because there'll be some offset thing, like the way medieval aristocrats bought in indulgences from the Catholic Church, where you were basically allowed to do things. Basically, this era, I've said this to my daughter and her friends many times here, the era that I grew up in, where you get cheap travel, where you could afford stuff, you could have stuff beyond your wildest dreams. The life that the average person, even on the lowest income right now, has compared to someone in the 1950s is indescribably rich and full. Ability to travel, to having a computer in your hand to see the world, and is amazing. And they want to shut that down. They want us to go back to a time when only the rich can travel, only the rich get to eat what they want, only the rich get to go where they want, and even only the rich will get to put their sodding washing machine on when they want. It's an abomination. And these are the people who claim to be morally superior to people like me. I get messages whenever I, just for the sake of it, just to irritate people, tweet that I'm on holiday, just because it makes me laugh to do it, to get all the hate. I'm scuba diving, having a great time with my family. If you want to sit and hate me on Twitter while I'm doing that, I mean, it just makes my life happier, is all I can say. But I will get messages from people saying, you should be ashamed of yourself. And I'm literally like, if I could afford a private jet, I'd be on a private jet. I don't care. I want everyone to be able to have their own private jet. I want everyone to be rich and live their best life, not worrying about when they put the sodding kettle on.
That's the whole point of politics used to be, how can we make your life better, freer, more prosperous? They're chucking all of that out, or more accurately, they're chucking that out for people on middle and low incomes. Everyone at the top will be absolutely fine. They can afford these indulgences, no carry-ons paid.
If you can't hear Tom properly, but I've not turned his microphone off, it's just gone a bit wrong. I promise we'll get that mended. 11:24 is the time. Back in just a few moments. This is Talk.
Just ask you the question for the third time. Is there another country that's cut their emissions by more than 42%?
If you were
just say no if there isn't one.
No. We haven't, because that's not our fair share of effort. Look, we've been polluting for hundreds of years.
I'm going to try one more time. Assad, I'll try one more time. Has there been another country that has cut its emissions, yes or no, by more than 42%?
Relatively, no.
No, thank you.
across the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, that was fun. 11:28 is the time. We've got a microphone that Tom Slater, editor of Spectrum, can be heard by. Can you hear him now?
Hopefully. Is it coming through?
Everyone nodded. We all
There we
heard
go.
the hopefully. We only missed, I think, about a sentence.
They're
but
deprived of my great insights.
I mean, seriously, guys, if you'd heard properly what he'd said, it would have changed your life. You missed a moment. Do you want to hear, by the way, we've just been talking, obviously, if you've just tuned in, about the lunacy of the COP29 summit. The next one, by the way, is in Brazil. Bet there'll be a lot of people there. I think the attendance at summits is all the eco summits are always somewhere fabulous. Like eco summits in the Maldives. I think I might be able to make that one.
Absolutely.
Will I have to fly there? I don't approve of flying. It's the only way to get there. Before it sinks. By the way, Maldives not sinking. But Antonio Guterres is the UN Secretary General. He is both a buffoon for his hysteria, his 13-year-old Greta levels of hysteria about climate, but also an evil, awful human being for his condemnation of Israel, despite being the victim of the attack by Hamas. I mean, a genuinely awful human being, generally. Some of the things that he's been saying today, climate finance is not charity, it's an investment. I mean, it's not. An investment means you're going to get a return on it. You're not. Climate action is not optional, it's an imperative. Yeah, it is optional. Is he right about anything? Both are indispensable to a livable world for all humanity and a prosperous future for every nation on earth. Yeah, apart from Israel, apparently, Antonio. Yeah, apart from Israel. Doubling down, he says, on fossil fuels is absurd. How's it working out for America? Pretty well, I'd say. The clean energy revolution is here, he says. No group, no business and no government can stop it. Leaders at COP29 can't, and must ensure it is fair and fast enough to limit global temperature rise to 1.5 degrees Celsius. Oh, yes, and the president of Azerbaijan, hosting COP29, has said that fossil fuels, like oil and gas, are a gift of God, and countries should not be blamed for having them and shouldn't be blamed for bringing those resources to the market because the market needs them. I mean, he is right. I mean, I give him that.
Yes, this is all the fantasy signed up. I mean, if the green energy revolution, so-called, was so advanced and obvious, you wouldn't need to basically force people to take up these technologies. You wouldn't need to have these summits. It would be taking care of itself.
Don't you remember when they used to have to force people to leave horses and carriages at home and buy cars?
They're like, please, we'll give you scrappage on that horse. We'll, help you buy the new one.
We'll have a zone that you can't drive into with your horse and carriage, only with a car. Again, you didn't have to do that. The technology works. Yeah. And there will be cleaner technology. And when we have that technology, and by the way, it's not hydrogen, and it's not going to be wind and solar. Do you know when we used to rely on wind and solar? Do you remember? That was before the Industrial Revolution, when we were all poor and everyone died at the age of 35.
But that's what they want to go back to, whether they want to admit it or not. And all this talk about prosperity and,
I hate these
crocodile tears about the developing world because they're more hit by climate change. The reason that parts of the developing world are more hit by adverse weather events is because they're underdeveloped, and in many cases because international organisations, NGOs, have put incredible pressure, actually, on the political class within those countries not to develop and to embrace technologies which will not deliver the prosperity.
And now they're asking for $1 trillion a year to fund them not developing fossil fuels. Also, this is one of the biggest lies that's told, and we're told, hundreds of thousands of people die every single year around the world because of pollution. They probably claim it's millions, but hundreds of thousands of polluted air. Do you know what the vast majority of those deaths are from? They're from people living in their little mud huts with no access to electricity and gas, who are burning wood on wood burning fires for their food because they don't have access to clean, safe fossil fuels, and that's why they're dying, and that's why their children are dying. It's such an evil, immoral, economically illiterate lie, the whole thing. And I really think, genuinely, if you're pontificating right now about getting to clean energy, what you really mean is you want poor people in the third world and you want poor people here to have worse lives than they've got already. And I think that makes you a really nasty person. Hi. From me. Anyway, look, let's talk. Oh, by the way, the UK, Keir Starmer, by the way, giving his speech at COP29. I mean, the world leaders aren't there to listen to it, and I don't force you to listen to it. But if you're watching any other channel, you will actually have to listen to Keir Starmer. But your usual rules here, my usual rules apply. We like you too much to play this stuff out to you. It's bad enough having to hear him in this country, let alone when he's in Azerbaijan, having flown there. I mean, really? Come on. But he's pledged the UK to an 81% cut to emissions by 2035. That's on emissions to date, basically. Basically, it's up from 78%. Again, yeah, well, we'll easily do that because we won't have any industry left. Once you get rid of all the coal and the steel-making plants, you can cut your emissions really, really well. And then you just have to import it from another country that uses coal-fired plants. It is... Tom, it's literally insane.
Yeah, it's putting a positive spin on deindustrialisation. That's basically what's happened over the course of the past decades. Oh, Britain has cut its emissions by so much.
Brilliant.
It's because of the fact that we don't make anything anymore. We import everything. We increasingly import energy as well. And it's one of those things where these are actually really bad for your economy and your society and for jobs. And at some point, this is going to become abundantly clear to people. It might have to be blackouts, as we've been talking about previously. It might just have to be honest, America kind of shooting ahead on all kinds of economic indicators while parts of Europe still clinging to this orthodoxy, go the opposite direction. Who knows what it will be, but at some people are going to really realise, at some point they're going to realise that this is a project of impoverishment which will only really benefit the top layer of society who are even involved in these big green energy deals or
They're all making money out
for
of
the
it.
virtue of it. You know, they like being able to spend an extra part of their income on feeling like a good person, whereas a lot of people don't have that luxury.
Yes, exactly, absolutely. Look, we've yapped on. I've mostly yapped on. You may have guessed I feel quite strongly about this issue, sorry. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Also, want to get to your calls. Lots of calls already coming in about whether Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby, should resign. Do you think he's even going to last the day? We spoke to a former chaplain to the late Queen. You think he won't last even more hours? I wonder if he would resign while Prime Minister's out of the country. I have a funny feeling it might come a bit later than that, but I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Also on assisted dying, Gary Lineker leaving the BBC, or indeed if you want to talk about COP29. Ed Miliband, do feel free to call in. But the only useful thing you do all year, this is talk that have common sense.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning to you. This is Talk the Home of Common Sense with me, Julia Hartley-Brewer. Tom Slater, editor of Spiked Online, still with me. Let's go to your phone calls coming in on lots of different topics. Gary is on the line. He's in Yorkshire. He's called up on 0344 499 1000 to talk about Justin Welby, the Archbishop of Canterbury. Gary, do you think he should resign? Do you think he will resign over his failure to basically speak up about a child sex abuser within the church?
He certainly ought to, but I don't think he's got any morals himself, so I'm not sure whether he will do. There's that much happening on the programme this morning.
No.
All you've got to do is throw in the word health authority, and we'll have to ask Ian Collins to hold on for an hour before he comes in.
It's too much. It's too much. I love my job.
The point I wanted to make is my wife is very active in the church locally, and she's in charge of the safeguarding for our particular church, and because she's been doing it for some time when she's been associated with the Girl Guides.
When you say safeguarding, so what does that involve?
That involves making sure that everybody who's going to be doing things within the church, whether it's church wardens, helpers or whatever, vicars, of course, that they are checked out to make sure that they've got no skeletons.
Check on their criminal records and things. Exactly. Okay, making sure they're safe to be with children. Of course, we know that most people who abuse children don't have a criminal record, so I'm not entirely sure that works. But
no, I'm sure you're right. But I think as well that what it has to do is give people a route that if there are any problems, they can take it to somebody who can be trusted for them to help out. Now, she was talking with one of the vicars the other day, and he said, and sorry, I should have mentioned that she advises a lot of people in different churches in the whole of the diocese. So she was talking to a vicar the other day, and he said, what do you think of the situation as far as Welby's concerned? She says, well, he's got to resign, he's got to go. And he said, well, if you'd have come across this in your safeguarding, what would you have done? She said, that would have shocked him. Yeah. Simple as that. And he was a bit surprised that she said that. And she says, there's no question, you have to. And he was, as I say, taken aback a bit. And
he was arguing that he was thinking that wasn't what you would do? I mean,
from his reaction, I would say yes.
Wow.
And
check his hard drive.
She would have to take it to the next level up. If there is a system, obviously, that you go through, and if there's a problem with one particular level, then you go above that person to make the report. But at the end of this line is Archbishop Welby, and what would they do?
Yeah.
If they've got to go to him, if that's the only recourse that they've got, to take it up to that highest level. If I was involved in safeguarding now, I would say, look, I'm not doing it. Finish. There is no point in doing it. And if Welby stays there, there is no point in anybody doing any safeguarding.
That's a very, very good point, because ultimately, again, if it was a bishop, it would have to go to the archbishop, and he sets the culture of an organisation that says, we don't. I mean, genuinely, check the hard drive of anyone who wouldn't report it. Simple as that. Gary, fascinating call. Thank you so much. Tell your wife to keep up the fantastic work. Really appreciate your call. Laurie is on the line now. Laurie, you want to talk about another topic we've been talking about today, and that is assisted dying. That new bill being published as a private member's bill by the Labour MP Ken Leadbeater, which will allow assisted dying for people who've got 6 months left to live with this terminally ill, but not people who've got disabilities or anything like that. What do you make of this bill, and do you support it?
No, I don't. Assisted dying is already practiced in hospital. My husband had a heart attack, but also had an infection. 2 local hospitals. One deals with heart attacks. One dealt with infection. They kept him in the hospital that deals with infections, and he subsequently died.
I'm so sorry.
Sorry. I talked to friends in Canada. They are now fast-tracking people with mental illness and veterans and people living on the streets. I don't trust doctors.
You think it's a slippery slope, and the law, as has happened in other countries, in many areas, that it will expand?
Yes, I do. And like I say, I don't trust doctors.
Yeah.
I myself have health issues, I will not spend my last days in a hospital.
Because of that.
And our judiciary, I'm sorry, I'm not going to trust them either.
Yeah, I can understand. And Tom Slater certainly has been in the studio with me all morning. You're very much the view. You don't. This is a slippery slope, and it can happen. The reality is, people are able to take their own lives. People who've got enough money can go to Dignitas in Switzerland, but have to leave their families. And there are far fewer safeguards. But pretty much anyone can go and do that. I want this bill personally. I want it to happen with a huge number of safeguards, and I completely understand the concern that there'll be a bunch of doctors who really sign off everybody, and that would be a concern, or judges who do, and people will get to know who you want to go and see, and I want to have safeguards. For instance, I don't want people with mental illness, mental health problems, to be able to do this. I think that would be a safeguard that would be necessary. But what about the people who say, look, I'm in agony, my life is going to end soon anyway, I don't want to live like this, I don't want to be remembered like this, my life is unbearable, I want to take my own life. Shouldn't they have the right to do so with safeguards?
I will be in that position. So, no, I don't.
Okay.
It's going to be inevitable. And I've had friends in the same position who spent their last hours in agony.
Yeah.
One whose death was hastened to the point where her husband didn't even get a chance to say goodbye, although he was actually following the ambulance.
Oh, that's so sad. Look, Dory, I'm so sorry for your loss, and I completely understand that scenario, why you wouldn't have trust in the authorities on all of that. Laurie, really appreciate your call. Thank you. Let's go to one last call just in this section. Jackie is on the line. She's in Manchester. We're going through all the big topics today. Jackie, you wanted to talk about net zero and the COP29 summit.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, Julia, it is the highlight of my day when you go on a rant about net zero, because I am thoroughly behind you.
I get out of my system before I go home.
Yeah. Well, my husband is a consultant in the power waste and recycling industry, and I've spent a long time researching this. And
the long winter nights must fly by.
Yes, they do. They do. But what worries me about this is this government that is moving so quickly and spending so much money that we haven't got. Yeah. And I find this sinister, malevolent. It's going to cause harm to British citizens. Yep. And I find that terrifying, that a British government would go headlong into something.
And the Tories were already doing it. Labour are going to do it even worse and more sort of obsessively, as it was more zealotry. But this is my thing. They must know. Hey, he's got the same degree I've got in PPE, but Ed Miliband ain't no scientist. But even I can do the numbers on this. They must know, unless you're absolutely stupid, that this doesn't happen, this is not going to work. Or they really think it is, in which case they're either stupid or crazy.
Well, I don't really know, Julia, but the thing is that it's like a form of eco-communism in as much as that wealth is being transferred from the taxpayer over to corporates and to the people that are investing in all these green industries. And then we've got the control element, because going green is about going without, but just for us. So there's something very, very sinister about this. And I think that the silent majority need to stop being silent and get more vocal on this.
100% with you on that, Jackie. Thank you so much for your call. 11:46 is the time. We're going to take a break. We're going to be talking about just the latest trans madness. I mean, and we lose track, frankly, of how much there is. But we're going to be talking about the founder of a breastfeeding support charity that's quit because they're now focused on trans women, which, of course, are men who can't breastfeed because they're men. We'll talk about that up next. This is Talk.
I want people who have served in the military, men and women, off the streets. I think our social care system, I think our justice system is in the goddamn toilet. I think there are things that need to be dealt with apart from this ideological belief. And there again I love Trump, because what does he say? They're all jumping up and down, oh, COP29, and he just says, I'm going to drill and frack and frack and drill. Brilliant.
He says drill, baby, drill.
Yeah,
drill,
because
baby,
it's underneath the ground and it's a commodity and a source of wealth for his country.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good morning to you. This is Talk, the home of common sense, 11:51. Tom Slater is me. Can't wait to get your thoughts as extra spiked online on this latest madness. I mean, these stories just keep on coming. But one of the founders of the world's oldest breastfeeding support charity, this is La Lèche League International, has quit in protest at the inclusion of the charity of transgender women. I don't know how you can include transgender women, because transgender women are men. I'm not sure they do breastfeed, although there has been, for some reason, some idea that some men can be given drugs to breastfeed their child. But I thought we weren't giving drugs to children. We don't give them Calpol even without, a doctor's assurance. But let's talk about this with Bev Jackson. She's co-founder of the LGB, that's Lesbian Gay Bi Alliance, and joins us now. Good morning to you, Bev.
Good morning. Thank you for having me on.
I mean, genuinely, I looked at the story, Mark. You said, well, hold on a minute. Well, how have they included transgender women? We know what transgender women are. They are men who identify as if they're women, but they're men. Now, last time I looked, I've yet to see a single man who can breastfeed. So in what way is La Lèche International actually pandering to these men's needs?
Well, this is just part of the lie, isn't it? That the lie that we've all been told, that we have to believe that some women are men and some men are women, and we simply have to accept that. I see that when she resigned, she condemned the group's shift from focusing on mothering to indulging the fantasies of adults. We should say indulging the fantasies of men, and I think we do have to start just calling them men, because the public is completely confused when you say trans women. They say, what are those again? Are those women who want to be men or men who want to be women?
I've started doing that, just saying men who identify or believe they're women. Well, this is, the woman who's resigned, Marion Thompson, she's 94 years old. She's been with that charity since the beginning. And again, a lot of women who, I was very lucky. I put my daughter in. She was born 18 years ago on Friday. We celebrated her 18th birthday last week. And I remember literally within seconds of her being born, I was breastfeeding, had no problems. And I've had so many friends who've gone through such anguish trying to breastfeed, or difficulties. And it's so much pressure on lots of women now that these sort of charities do really, really amazing work. But it's largely women helping women, isn't it?
And it's women prioritising their babies. We prioritise our children. Mothering is about what you do, which is best for the child, not what is best for your own fantasies. And that is what's so... some of these lies are really pernicious. This is one of them. Another one is men who claim to be lesbians, which is, of course, for my organisation, particularly disgusting. And it's a kind of theft of what is essentially female. And we just won't stand for it.
Well, exactly. And people are fed up with it. And I actually hate the fact that people now are saying, female as opposed to woman. No, I'm not giving away the word woman. You're a woman, I'm a woman. Tom Slater's here, he's a man. We all know what we are. When my daughter was born, I didn't go, I wonder what she's going to, or they are going to identify as. I looked down, it was a girl, she's a girl, and she'll be a girl, she'll be a woman for the rest of her life. She can't change that. Now,
and that's why these self-ID laws are so pernicious. The new one that's just come into effect in Germany allows parents to change the gender and this whole sex and gender thing, let's not get into that, of their child from birth. And it is really pernicious because it is based on a lie. But exactly, and we have to get back to the truth.
Get back to the truth, get back to the facts, and particularly in anything medical or anything to do with health. And we're talking, if you can breastfeed, it's very good for your baby, it's the health of the baby. We should always be focusing on the facts, and this is the key thing, that we've been so much work over the years so that women can feel comfortable. I always breastfed in public, do not care. You can do it subtly. You don't have to flop them out, for goodness sake. Give me a break, ladies. But then we had this move towards, you know, apparently men believing that they could, you know, if they wanted to identify as women, whether they could breastfeed, using drugs. And there was a big argument online the other day about how, no, but men can breastfeed. They can take certain drugs that will induce their nipples to produce stuff. Now, I'm sorry, when you have a newborn baby, the one thing you don't do is give your child any unnecessary drugs. My God, you don't give them paracetamol before the age of 12, for goodness sake. That's how careful we are. But we're just going to give some weird hormonal drugs to a man so he can have a baby latch onto his hairy nipple. Are you kidding me? I mean, I'm sorry. We're into sexual abuse territory at that point, in my view. We're not talking about kids.
And we hear of women who wish to be men, who call themselves trans men, continuing to take testosterone while getting pregnant, which is actually the thing that women do. And that this being said, well, you know, I heard an activist say the other day that testosterone might possibly affect the fetus, but we shouldn't focus on that because we mustn't normalise having normal babies. I mean, really. We are into some really quite horrible territory here.
We really are, but again, totally undermining the very definition of what it is to be a woman and frankly, the greatest thing that we do, which is to carry, if those who do have a child, but able to carry a child and to feed a child. It's the most magnificent, wonderful thing in the world.
Yes, and of course, breastfeeding is a continuation of the symbiotic relationship that you have with your baby when in the 9 months that you're nurturing it while she or he is still inside you.
Yeah, exactly. But can I ask you about another story, though? Because I think we're all in agreement on that. Everyone sane is, and we just need to speak up about it more because people don't realise this stuff is happening. But there's also another story, and I love this man. This is Jim Orwin, and he's 67 years old, and he's been sacked by East Riding Yorkshire Council for using an email footer about his pronouns because there was a suggestion from the boss. Would everyone like to use their preferred pronouns? Now, I would have guessed that Jim Orwin was a he, him, and I'd call him Mr. Orwin in a letter to him. But no, preferred pronouns. So he looked up what the preferred pronouns was, and he decided because you're allowed to put anything you wanted, he decided that his were XY chromosome guy / adult human male. Now, it's about himself. He's pointing out that he is a man, that we just use that word, man. He got sacked because he refused to stop using that preferred pronoun header or footer, and he's now been hit with a £12,000 legal bill for a tribunal battle. But he says he's got no regrets, and I'm glad, and I think we should crowdfund the payment for him. Why, if anyone can identify as anything they want, why can't he identify as the thing he actually is?
Well, we're just all fed up with this compelled speech, aren't we? We are really fed up, and obviously our sympathies are with this man, but he seems to have said in court that this was a protest rather than standing up for his beliefs, and that's why this case went the way it is, and that's very unfortunate, because of course we're just all fed up with it. We're fed up with being told that we can have that we should have preferred pronouns. We're fed up with having to lie about people's sex. And some of us are starting to lose our patience. And I think we have to realise that this is going to take a very long time. It's Japanese knotweed. It's worked its way into every institution of our society. And we have to take a deep breath and just fight back slowly, one step at a time.
Absolutely. I love it. I think when women like you and me get fed up with something, things usually start changing. I've got my faith in you, Bev Jackson. Wonderful, wonderful campaigner, co-founder of the LGBT Alliance. Thank you for that. Tom Slater, you guys at Spike have been fantastic on this issue, fighting the insanity. But it is just extraordinary, both of these stories.
No, absolutely. And it just shows, as Bev was saying there, how deeply rooted a lot of this stuff is. It's going to take a hell of a lot of time to dislodge, and I think it's going to take people going more on the offensive and to say, we're not going to brook this ideology. You're entitled.
Quiet anymore.
You're entitled to these views, but we're entitled to say what you're saying is absolute nonsense, and you're not going to compel people to agree with you under fear of cancellation. Those days are over, and you just I think there's always a tendency to just always, you know, declare it over. It's nowhere near over. It's
absolutely no. We had Cass report, we thought, oh yeah, no, absolutely no. Although again, I think Trump is going to be helpful in changing things in America, and that may, you know, we're downstream from America, that may improve things, but we shall see. Love to hear your thoughts on this and on everything we are talking about today, including Justin Welby. Will he go? Should he go? Give us a call. This is Talk. We are, of course, the home of common sense.
DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon. Welcome back to the show. I'm Julia Hartley-Brewer. This is Talk, the home of common sense, whether you're listening on DAB+ radio, watching on YouTube, listening on your smart speaker, watching on connected device, all the different ways you can do it. It's great to have your company. Great also to have the company of Tom Slater, editor of Spiked Online, who's been with us throughout the show. Plenty more to come from you. Coming up in this hour, we've got plenty more to talk about. Lots of your calls still coming on pretty much everything we're talking about. Although surprisingly few on Gary Lineker. I suppose with issues like, you know, child sex abuse and being covered up and Justin Welby and whether or not he stayed in his job, assisted dying and COP29, I suppose there are more important things than a highly paid former footballer, even the BBC. Who knew? But anyway, coming up in this hour, we are going to be talking about terminally ill people with less than 6 months to live could be allowed to take their own lives. This is under the assisted dying bill that's been published today. The vote is going to happen, a free vote in the House of Commons in 2 weeks' time. How would you vote? Well, we'll talk to a guest up next. If he was an MP, he would definitely vote against that. Also, as I say, the Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby, huge pressure, growing calls for him to resign over his handling, or his failure to handle child sex abuse scandal in the church. A bishop, multiple victims of the abuse, and 3 senior members of the clergy have all called for Welby to quit as the leader of the Church of England, and of course also the spiritual advisor to the King as well. And a new stop smoking pill will be available free on the NHS to tens of thousands of adults, part of a major government drive towards preventing ill health. I'm sure they'll go against it eventually though, because they were pro-vaping, now they're anti-vaping. So difficult to keep up, isn't it? Maybe people just give up the fags, I don't know, on their own. Anyway, this is Talk. Welcome to the home of common sense. Tom Slater, as I say, it's still with me. Just before we go to our next guest, let's just recap on what we were talking about earlier about the assisted dying story, because I want to talk to our guest about this in just a couple of moments. This bill is being published by a private member's bill. It's a backbench MP, Ken Leadbeater, and this is the first time since 2015 there's actually a vote in Parliament by MPs. They voted against any form of assisted dying being allowed last time round, although Keir Starmer interestingly voted for it. Under this bill, this will only be available to people who are terminally ill, who 2 doctors, independent doctors, have signed off that they believe yes, you only have 6 months to live, not a year to live, but 6 months to live, and signed off that they believe they are mentally capable of making that decision. It then, 14 days later, goes to a judge who will then make the final decision, can interview the person, the doctors, and to make that decision. And at that point, so 21 days in total, you'll be allowed to be assisted with dying. Now, I'm very much in favour of this. I want safeguard after safeguard after safeguard in this. I would also open it up personally to people who are living in a body that they don't want to be in anymore. If they are, you know, a paraplegic, if they are in a physical state where they just feel like this life is not worthwhile to me. Now, someone else may take a different view, but I think people should be in control of their own bodies and their own lives and also their own deaths. Why are you opposed to this, Tom?
I think it's 2 fundamental points quickly, one of which is that these safeguards, so-called, often melt away incredibly quickly. Canada began with its own legislation very similar to this in terms of the limits. We're now in a situation where there were these horror stories of people applying for assisted suicide just because they were being chucked out of their house, but because they had chronic back pain, they qualified for the procedure, actually had it signed off by doctors. Yeah. Again, these are the kind of moral horrors I think you unleash when, going on to the second point, you breach the principle that the state should, on the one hand, create 2 categories of citizens: those whose suicide they will happily support and facilitate, and those whose suicide they will do everything they can to stop from taking place. And it also, as a consequence of that, I think, creates an atmosphere in society in which people who might not otherwise feel this way would feel themselves to be a burden, suggest to some, to disabled people, that their lives are not worth living in quite the same way. And particularly in the context of palliative care not being where it should be, I think that choice can quickly become somewhat illusory. To be
and that is a point that actually Wes Streeting, the Health Secretary, he said he will vote against this bill. It's a free, it's an unwhipped vote. People can vote on their own moral conscience. That actually, palliative care isn't good enough, and so there's not really a proper choice. But I don't think you can have legislation holding off for the NHS to sort itself out. But really interesting arguments. Thank you for that. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. Do get in touch. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text 87222. Get in touch at Talk TV. Also, you can leave a message at the bottom of our YouTube page. Calls are charged at the national rate. Text cost £1. Standard network rate message. Also, I'll get lots of your calls still to come in about Justin Welby. The Archbishop of Canterbury is facing growing calls to resign over his handling of a child sex abuse scandal. Should he resign? Tell us why he should. Tell us why he shouldn't. Right now, though, let's talk to another guest on this issue of assisted dying. Peter D. Williams. He's director of the Family Education Trust, and he joins us now. Good afternoon to you.
Good afternoon. Thank you for having me.
Thank you very much indeed for joining us. I have to say, I was rather surprised at Tom Slater's stance on this. We've actually often find ourselves in agreement on a lot of issues. But on this moral issue, it is fascinating how much people can, people's views perhaps are often not what we expect them to be. And it doesn't divide along a sort of a left-right sort of divide, does it? So tell us what your concerns are about this new assisted dying bill.
Well, I'm glad that it's been published in the first place, but it means that because we are less than 3 weeks till the actual debate in Parliament, we have less time to consider this, both as public and as legislators, than the time it would take in the bill for someone to apply for assisted suicide. So I think what we need to do is have a very serious discussion about the safeguards that exist here, which unfortunately are nothing new and nothing surprising. They've been considered before by countless legislatures, including the House of Commons several times, and rejected them. The idea that there would be two doctors to say whether or not somebody has mental capacity, whether someone has a settled wish. Well, the problem with that is that how would a doctor within 3 weeks know that an individual is not being at least subtly pressured by their family, by their caregivers, by the medical establishment? I mean, there are a lot of doctors in hospitals who, very frankly, would have an attitude, I think, eventually, that we need to free up a bed. The NHS is under extreme strain. So how would you know that that kind of pressure, which undermines autonomy, people in this situation are in a situation whereby they have radically reduced autonomy because of their physical and mental condition, how do you know that that's not happening rather than someone making a free choice? Well, the answer is you don't. And when we've had other structures, such as, for example, another issue, the abortion issue, you have two doctors there, and that was meant to be a very limited bill in the Abortion Act 1966. What we have is abortion on demand functioning. So if that's going to be the case, that's not really a safeguard to protect people who might be under really quite profound stress and pressure, and therefore not making a free choice at all. So the idea of autonomy within this is hugely problematized by the kind of things that are going on.
I mean, I share a lot of your concerns about sort of a slippery slope on this, and we've seen this go that way in many American states and in many countries. People citing Canada as an example. Caller earlier pointing out, homeless people, falling on bad times, saying, life's not worth living.
To the effect it has the most vulnerable. And that's exactly what we should be doing with the law in this case.
OK, I understand that concern. I'm not sure that analogy quite works. But my thing here is, I know that seeing members of my own family and seeing people, I'm visiting, an elderly relative in a care home and seeing the state of some people in there now, they may view that their lives are worthwhile. That's entirely up to them. And I may, in that scenario, view that my life is worthwhile, but I may not. And the idea, and I've interviewed plenty of people who are in a situation where they feel their life is unbearable. Now, people who are in great pain, great mental anguish, who only got 6 months to live, I don't understand why we would insist on those people continuing to live on a life that they don't feel is worthwhile when... And people get upset when you use this analogy. You wouldn't do that to your pet dog. You wouldn't do it to your pet cat. We show kindness in those scenarios when people are in pain, when clearly there is anguish and there's much less quality of life. We're not going to be forcing it on people who say, no, I still have a quality of life. It is still worth living, even without all the things which other people might consider valuable. My life is still worth living. We wouldn't be forcing people into it. But for people who do want to end their lives, as long as we could put in, I mean, a million more safeguards, why would that not be the right thing to do?
Well, for one thing, we've never come up with safeguards that actually seem to work. And that's why they keep on coming up with the same ones time and time again, notwithstanding the fact that they've been pointed out how insufficient they are to actually provide protection. But look, all of us, every single one of us, can put ourselves in a situation of somebody, if we've not suffered chronic or terminal illness ourselves, whereby we would be driven to want to end our own lives. We can all imagine that. We've had family and friends who have been in similar situations. But the key thing here is that compassion has to be expanded to everyone, not just a few people who are self-confident enough to want to end their own lives. It's all very well for people like the famous actresses and actors who have come out in favour of this to say, well, I would want to end my own life where I want to. But there are lots of people who don't have the self-confidence or the personal strength and autonomy, especially when they're ill, to actually make this kind of choice without being under subtle or even very profound pressure. And if we want to have a situation where everyone is, quote unquote, included, where everyone is safeguarded, where everyone is protected, then there do have to be, unfortunately, imperfect worlds. And the imperfect world we live in right now is one where people, like those people who are very self-confident, cannot end their own lives if they want to. They aren't given the help by doctors.
Well, I mean, except, of course, people do end. Desperate people end their own lives all the time. I mean, suicide is the biggest killer of men under the age of 45. People do end their own lives. It's an absolute tragedy in those scenarios. But here's my thing. I mean, I would want to expand it to people who felt that their life was not worthwhile, not just that their life was ending soon, or even that you've got a year to live. And I've had conversations with my own family members, husbands, mother, father, about the husbands sound plural. I've only got one. About what life would be of value to us and what it wouldn't. Now, we may change our minds in future, and a lot of people do. Someone will say, "Oh, I could never live a life, like that." But actually, there is still worth. There is still worth in it. And certain value in it, and I certainly wouldn't want other people making that choice. But there is also a point where you say people don't want to be a burden to their families. That's a legitimate moral concern and a loving concern that a lot of people do have. They don't want to, for instance, leave the burden of the cost of their funeral to their family members, but also people who, for instance, believe they're or they've been diagnosed with onset dementia, and they feel like at a point when I feel I'm no longer going to be me anymore, and I know the distress that my family members are going to go through. Actually, I would rather terminate my life before I'm no longer the person I believed myself to be, and I'm no longer, a father or a mother to my child, or a husband or a wife to my partner. Those, I think, are reasonable decisions that a reasonable human being could make.
I think that if we live in a compassionate society, we should be doing everything to militate against somebody feeling that they should end their own life because they feel like a burden on other people. That's not a compassionate society.
No, but you will be. No, when I've watched, I'm at an age where so many of my friends are going through their parents having severe dementia, and then their parents dying. And the thing that I notice every time is the relief when their parent does actually die, because they feel like they kind of died already, maybe a couple of years ago. They don't know who they are, they don't know who the grandkids are. They're kind of existing rather than living. Now, I'm just saying that I could understand in that scenario, and I'm the mother of an only child, that I would not want her to be in a situation when I'm in my, fingers crossed, my 90s, and I'm completely doolally, and my grandmother died in her 90s, and she didn't know who any of us were for about 20 years, that actually I would rather not put her through that. And that would be an act of love from a mother. That wouldn't be an immoral thing that I was pressured into.
I think what you're doing is actually making the case for our side of the argument, really, because there are two reasons for I would say that. The first is simply that it seems like all concern there is focused on the people who are left behind, the strong and the living.
What's wrong with that?
And the other thing that I think is really problematic is that if you have a situation in which that exists, the kind of principles you're laying down, then it goes much beyond this bill. It goes into saying, why not the disabled? Why not the elderly? Why not people who are just chronically ill in any case? And if that's the case, then you're giving us the logical cliff, not just a slippery slope, the logical cliff of which we fall when we say that actually physicians can involve themselves in the suicide of their patients. And that's a society which would be so easily abused to hurt people who are just, they may want to still keep on living, but instead they're given the subtle pressures of a medical system that is limited, or family who are just frustrated with how long this person's taking to die, or any number of other things that are actually really about making sure that people who are strong in the living are really giving
I understand all those concerns. I think those are all legitimate. There must be somewhere between there must be some good place between, I don't know, people living in agony or living a life in a body that doesn't work anymore, that they don't feel they're there anymore, worrying about cognitive decline and the like, and Logan's Run and everyone being killed at 30. Do you know what I mean? There must be some happy place in between those two.
We do have that, and it's called palliative care. And whilst not everyone is served by palliative care, because not everyone, sometimes it's very often not a matter of physical pain. In fact, physical pain is a very low reason why people persistent suicide in the countries where they have it, where there's a palliative care system in place. And we have the best in the world, but we have also a postcode lottery where people don't have access to analgesic drugs. So that's another pressure that people might come under. But irrespective, palliative care is the answer. So if we really want to have a situation where people are no longer feeling like they need to end their lives, we need to have a stronger approach to palliative care, not one where we say, actually, we'll enable you to end your own life rather than give you the care that you need.
OK, really interesting to talk to you. Peter D. Williams, Director of the Family Education Trust. I've got to be honest, she hasn't persuaded me. I do think that there is... I'd like to have some safeguards against slippery slopes, but I do think that if someone... I think it's crazy you can't have a conversation where you can say, of course, because you're disabled, no matter how disabled, mentally or physically, your life still has value and no one should take that life away from you. I'm not even remotely suggesting that. But I also think it is also valid to say, without changing that view, that someone in that body themselves could have the right to say, I don't feel my life has enough value for me personally to want to continue.
But those decisions aren't made in a vacuum, as we know. There could be issues around palliative care. There could be issues around pressure from within the family, whether it's real or perceived. There's also the fundamental issue with the fact that doctors get things wrong. There's many cases of people who've said been given 6 months to live and are still with us 10 years later. What, in a situation in which someone, on the basis of faulty information, made that choice, is another moral horror that we don't really want to walk into. So I think it's one of those things where, fundamentally, I think it is about the principle, but it's also about what the kind of Pandora's box you open up when the state decides that actually we are going to take a position which is that suicide in your case is supportable in these circumstances and not these. I think that's a horrendous line to be drawing.
I'd like us to focus on preventing all the suicides of young men. I think we should do more. If we're so worried about people taking their own lives, I wish that people spent more time worrying about an awful lot of those young men who feel their lives, because it's virtually a chronic disease among young men, suicide now. I mean, that would be my top priority. It's like people who worry about high rates of abortion. Spend your time worrying about contraception. Spend your time worrying about the kids that aren't wanted. Spend your time worrying about that rather than worrying about the kids that weren't wanted. Just straight out there. Love to hear your thoughts on this and on everything we're talking about today. Do get in touch, 0344 499 1000. Got a couple of calls already lined up on this, and they're looking... I think they're going to maybe it might change. I don't know whether the conversation with Peter just changed your mind, or with Tom, or whether what my next guest, caller is going to say will change your mind. But give us a call, have your say. 0344 499 1000. This is Talk, the home of common sense.
want to warm the houses of pensioners. I want people who have served in the military, men and women, off the streets. I think our social care system, I think our justice system is in the goddamn toilet. I think there are things that need to be dealt with apart from this ideological belief. And there again, I love Trump, because what does he say? They're all jumping up and down, COP29, and he just says, I'm going to drill and frack and drill. Brilliant.
He says drill, baby, drill.
Yeah,
drill,
because
baby,
it's underneath the ground and it's a commodity and a source of wealth for his country.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon to you. This is Talk, the home of common sense, coming up to 12:25. Really thoughtful, really interesting conversations going on about this assisted dying bill. Lots of people also getting in touch, of course, about Justin Welby and whether or not he should survive as Archbishop of Canterbury or not over that sex abuse scandal, which he basically just kept stum on. We're going to return to Welby in just a few moments, talk to one of the people who set up that petition to ask Welby to go. We'll talk about that. But first up, let's get to your calls at 0344 499 1000. A couple coming in, a couple I particularly want to talk to you about assisted dying. Phil is in Hertfordshire. Hello, Phil.
Good afternoon, Julia and Tom. Hello.
Lovely to talk to you. What do you want to say?
Yeah, assisted dying, I would be 100% in favour of it.
Yeah.
Now, the reason I'm saying that is I've recently lost my father.
I'm sorry.
Who suffered, thank you, who suffered with Parkinson's disease.
Oh, yeah.
Towards the end, basically, they just become a stiff human being, just can't move. And part of the muscle degeneration as well is swallowing.
Yeah.
Now, every time my dad tried to eat, he would choke. The amount of times he was in and out of A&E it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
So even they changed the diet so they're going to moist. But the frustration and the anguish and the pain and the torment that man went through was undescribable.
Was he, with Parkinson's, he's still compos mentis, so he was fully aware?
He was fully aware, Julia, of what was going on.
Did he ever express any urge to take his own life?
Yes, he said, I've had enough of this, I'm going to commit suicide.
But he wasn't presumably able to do so?
He wouldn't be allowed to do it, because obviously all of his medication was monitored and administered for him. He wouldn't have been able to do it. He wasn't weak enough. But and when he did die, I think he basically gave up. He stopped eating because he deteriorated so quick. And there will be times where I was feeding him, and you could see in his face the pain and the torment of him and the frustration of him trying to swallow.
Yeah.
And it's very hard as well, obviously, for the person or the family feeding him and being around him, seeing that person suffer. And he was suffering.
Now, here's the thing. So one of the things that Peter Williams was just saying was that, the pressure that the people will feel because he could have seen, his beloved son and other family members looking after him, the distress you went through as well, and that would become part of the thought process around wanting to take or have assisted dying to take their own life. What do you say to that?
Right, I think that's a valid point, but I think what you've got to do is think, am I being selfish? And I can honestly put my hand on my heart and say I wasn't thinking of myself when I was watching my dad. I was watching and seeing my dad suffer.
Yeah.
And I remembered how he used to be as a man, as a strong man before he was ill. You have to put your own feelings aside and really focus on that individual, your father or your mother. Yeah, it's very easy to say, and I go back to what you said about a pet. You wouldn't see a pet suffer. But we've got that choice. I've got no right to take somebody's human life or life and choose to take it. That's why it's a very complex subject. However, when you see someone suffering like that, I could wish that, but I wouldn't want to have the final decision saying, yes, end my father's life.
Yeah, you'd want him to have to make that decision. Look, again, I think a lot of people who've been through that end-of-life care can see, the anguish that it puts people through and why people would want to do it. But again, I'm sure, like we can understand we need so many safeguards to make sure that people aren't put under pressure.
We do, because it's horrific. It really is horrific for everybody involved. Yeah. And I'm sure whoever's going to make that decision, a judge or two doctors, it would be quite a sort of a traumatic thing for them to decide as well. Yeah, we can allow this guy to or this lady to take their own life. Yeah, it's a hell of a responsibility. So you're absolutely right. You've got to get them safeguards in, because you want to dot all the I's and you want to cross all them T's.
Absolutely. Look, thank you so much for your call. Again, I'm on behalf of all of us really sorry for your loss, Phil. Thank you very much indeed for your call. Let's go to Vivian. She's in Devon. Good afternoon to you, Vivian.
Hello.
Hello. What do you want to say?
I support the bill, and I hope that fairly soon it would include incurable neurological illnesses. I have got MS.
Yeah.
I have been in pain and losing my mobility for 10 years. Yeah. I'm on a morphine patch at the moment, and I'm in a lot of pain. I'll have to go up a dose. It's going to get worse and worse.
Yeah. Do you mind me asking how old you are, Vivian?
I'm 63.
You're 63, and you sort of, life was full and active and happy and...
Yeah, I was an active, independent and very private woman. I could end up lying in bed, having people feed me, wash me, and you can guess the rest.
Yeah.
I'll be in pain, and I'll be totally aware of what's going on.
Yeah.
And I think I should have the right to say enough is enough.
And I agree with you. And I'd want that for you and my family members and for myself. What safeguards do you think could be put in place that could enable you to do that, and to have that bill be through safely? Or do you think that, as a lot of people are saying, well, it's all about the palliative care, and if you had good palliative care and pain relief, then it would be OK?
I haven't got a lot of faith in palliative care. Like I say, I'm on morphine patches. Yeah. They're going to have to keep going up and up. And in the end, there'll be nowhere to go.
Yeah.
I should have the right to say enough's enough and die peacefully with my husband holding my hand.
Yeah.
The only way I'd be able to do it is by stop all food and fluids.
Yeah. And we allow people to do that extraordinarily. Hospitals are allowed to withdraw food, and we basically starve someone to death. And yet somehow that's moral, but we're not allowed to give them a drug to painlessly end their life.
Yep.
It is, I mean, again, you starved your dog to death, you'd be behind bars.
Yep.
What safeguards could be there, though, so that someone like you could use that law, but someone else who doesn't want to end their life, who does feel that life has still got quality and worth to them, that they're not pressured into it by their loved ones?
I don't know.
Do you know what? More people should give that answer.
I was trying to think of something clever to say, and I couldn't.
That was a clever thing to say. I don't know. And is that one of the arguments, though, that a lot of people are going to give if they vote against this bill, which is actually that they don't know, and if you don't know, you don't make the change?
Yes. Yeah. Also, what annoys me is all these healthy, pain-free people talking about the sanctity of life.
Oh, I know. I'm with you.
How about the sanctity of a miserable, immobile, painful existence? Not quite the same, is it?
Exactly. Exactly. I completely understand. I'm completely with you. I wish you the very best, Vivienne. Keep in touch with us. And thank you very much for that call. It was a really, really important call. Vivienne and Devon there. Tom Stater, I mean, what do you say to Phil and Vivienne? Very different perspectives from people literally living it.
No, absolutely. At the same time, one can reduce this discussion, or it's very compelling to hear everyone's stories on this. Yeah. I mean, I think it's also worth saying that many of the groups who oppose this outside of the Christian religious groups tend to be groups who work with disabled people, with long-term illnesses, because they have precisely the kind of opposite concerns to what we've heard expressed previously. So one can, you know, at what point do you kind of stack one awful experience against another awful experience? On one side, a feeling that people do want that offer of way out. On the other side, people having experienced in their own lives or seen it because of their own conditions, that there is that pressure to make that decision.
But that's
in a way
why,
that's
why for me it's an individual choice. Now again, if we could have perhaps more safeguards than this bill, but again, someone whose life is, you know, look, I mean, lockdowns it's not the direct analogy, of course it's not, but for a lot of people, you know, they weren't bothered by lockdown, they didn't see many people, they didn't do very much anyway, they lived at their home and they didn't, you know, but for other people it was a massive, you know, wrench on their need to be with other people, to travel, there's an aspect of life where, you know, people get different things out of life, and that's how it's individual. So there'd be somebody, for instance, whose greatest joy in life is fell walking or something, or playing football, and they can no longer do it, and they're now bedridden and in pain. And actually, for them, the loss of that life is such a great wrench that, whereas someone else whose life wasn't very physical anyway, it won't feel the same loss of life. I mean, again, that to me, that's the thing. It's an individual choice about what is of value to you in your life. But there we are. Do keep your calls coming in. Lots of you are on the board there. I'll try and get some more. We've got two more top guests to get to by the end of the show. Ian Collins coming up at 1. I'm sure there'll be other opportunities to get on air. But give us a call, 0344 499 1000. This is Talk.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon to you. This is Talk, the home of common sense. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. Extraordinary calls today. Thank you very, very much indeed. Tom Slater is still with me. We've been talking a bit earlier in the show about the Archbishop of Canterbury, Justin Welby. He's facing growing calls to resign over his handling of a child sex abuse scandal involving QC, a barrister who worked within the church and basically targeted children for the most horrific physical and sexual abuse over his many years in the church, targeting them through Christian camps and also through Winchester College private school. And then once he was left England, he decided to go and do it in South Africa as well. But basically many opportunities for Justin Welby when he was very junior, but also when he became Archbishop, to step in and to make sure there was an investigation to get justice and to stop that man from abusing, but he failed to do so, hence the calls to resign. Well, let's talk to Dr. Ian Paul. He's an Associate Minister at St Nick's Church in Nottingham. He's also a member of the Archbishop's Council, and he is one of the 3 originators of a petition calling for Welby to go within the church, which now got, this morning, 10,000 signatures. Good afternoon to you, Ian.
Good afternoon to you, Julia. It's now 11,500.
11,500 now, is it? It's growing certainly by the minute. Just explain to people who just have come to this topic what it is that you believe Justin Welby has done that is so wrong that means that he should resign his position as the Archbishop of Canterbury.
Well, Julia, it's worth pointing out what we're not saying. This isn't a case of scapegoating. This isn't a case of tokenism. This isn't any kind of witch hunt. And we also need to be clear that John Smythe was an Anglican. He was a lay reader of the Church of England, but the abuse did not happen in the Church of England. It didn't happen in a Church of England church. So we just need to be clear about that. I think what really summarises it for me was that on Sunday I was in 2 local churches. I was preaching there in 2 different services. I was talking about the amazing good news of Jesus Christ and how he invites us to follow him and to live a new life. And that is what is happening in churches up and down the country. And then on Monday morning, we open our proverbial newspapers or tune into Talk TV, and then we find all this about the report on the failure of the culture and the structure and the practice of senior leadership, including Justin.
Yeah.
And it's this disconnect which is the real problem. And, you know, I can tell you in our church, if you come into St Nick's Nottingham, you'll come through the door. We've got nice welcoming glass doors. The first thing you will see in the entrance lobby is a notice about safeguarding, a number to contact if you have any concerns, a safeguarding officer. And this is the problem. This is the disconnect. You know, so much good work is happening on the ground. I think in the last 10 years, the safeguarding culture of the Church of England has been revolutionised. We are at the leading edge of investing time and energy and money in all these things to make sure that Church of England churches are safe places for vulnerable people. And, you know, now we have this report and all the headlines are, you know, the Church of England covering abuse. A friend of mine messaged me and said he was in a meeting yesterday, he was in a voluntary thing. He spent all his time answering people's questions about,
that was their concern. So it undermines the work you're doing now. But crucially, in terms of the Archbishop, it does appear that in the 70s and 80s he was warned. Other people have testified that he did hear warnings that, you know, at the very least that this guy, John Smythe, was a wrong and, you know, rumours about. And but also that in 2013 he became Archbishop. He got a report about Smythe then, and no action was taken. He later, we believe, lied in an interview on radio that he said, well, the police have been told it's a matter for the police, but actually the police weren't investigating, didn't know about it. And also concerns, obviously, that he's had plenty of opportunities since. And is it the case, really, your argument is that, look, you did know, you had suspicions, and then you did know, you didn't hand this on to the police, you didn't do enough about it, and if the person who is at the top of an organisation doesn't act, the message that sends out, not just to other people outside the organisation, as you say, people are asking about it, but also within the organisation, is that you don't take child sex abuse seriously enough?
Well, I'm extremely reluctant. The 3 of us who set up this petition, we are not interested in being judge and jury. We're not the ones making the judgment. What we are doing is taking 2 things really seriously. First of all, we're taking the words of Keith Makin's painstaking report. It's 243 pages, and it's a traumatic read. I don't know if you've had a glance at it, because he sets out in very careful, detailed chronology all John Smythe's abuses, and they are really, really harrowing. But he also sets out very carefully the chronology of what various folk in the senior leaders of the church knew and what they did. So we're not making a judgment here. We're simply looking to what Keith Makin has said. And the key phrase in the report, I think he says, is that, yes, Justin didn't formally fail to follow safeguarding guidance at the time because, you know, the guidance wasn't really in place. This is the time of Jimmy Savile and the BBC. You know, there's all sorts of things going on. But what he does say is that he believes that Justin has personal and moral responsibility for this. Now, the other words we're taking seriously are Justin's own words. At the time of Jimmy Savile, Justin said about the BBC, with such a major failure in the organisation, the leaders should take responsibility. And we simply say, Justin, we agree with you.
Yeah,
so if it's good for the BBC, why isn't it good for the church?
And this is the key thing. Again, there's a lot of people saying, even if you didn't know, but actually suggested that you did. But this is one of the really painful things, and we've had this, whether it's Jimmy Savile or any of the cases since, whether it's sort of, abuse and exploitation of women, whether it's of children, whether it's what's happened, in Rotherham or Rochdale or within the church or wherever. Again and again and again. Harvey Weinstein, in New York. Again and again and again. We're told, everyone knew. Everyone suspected. People, these people, and again, when you talk about that, you don't want to go into too much the detail of what was done to these boys and young men, but it was vicious beatings. Children were beaten to the point where they were virtually unconscious. One child, was a guest mentioned, earlier, small point, in Zimbabwe, may have been beaten to death. Just horrific abuse. This stuff, these kids are then going to go to school and go to PE. They're covered in welts. Is someone not saying, hey, what the hell happened to you? And when it happens to the second child, what the hell happened to you? This is one of the reasons why I remember being told, why everyone had to undress in PE, because they wanted to be able to see if kids were being abused. The fact that so many people seem to know that this stuff is going on in so many organisations, particularly in churches, and nothing happens. Why don't people speak up? Why don't they say, this is clearly too awful, and the reputation of my organisation doesn't matter when it's a question of safeguarding a child?
I know. Well, the reality, Julia, is that 98% of the people in the Church of England do say that. And, part of the grief, not just for the awful abuse, but part of the grief as well is that, we believe we've got some really great good news to share with people. We believe that churches are doing great things up and down the land. We're major contributors to social welfare. We're probably the only place in the country where you get such a diversity of people of different wealth, different levels of socioeconomic wealth, different ethnicities. Our church in Nottingham is so diverse. We actually have our Bible readings in 4 languages on a Sunday. The other week, I had to conduct a communion service in Spanish because we've got migrants from Central America. And
do you know what's so funny is that you're trumpeting that as a good thing. I don't think that's a good thing. I think they're living here. They should probably learn English in the same way as I think someone going to Spain should learn Spanish.
They're asylum seekers who are fleeing violence and the drug culture in Colombia. So I'm going to welcome them. Of course they're learning English. The other thing we do is every Monday afternoon come to our church and we're having English classes because we want people to integrate.
That's very worthwhile.
Churches are unique places. And, if people only see these headlines, they're not seeing the full picture. And that is the great grief for many of us, that this abuse happened. It was known of by a very small number of people. In the 80s, they tried to do a cover-up amongst themselves. And that means for us, when we say, OK, this is a horrendous thing, it is hugely damaging to institutions, but that's a reason to be open and consistent. I mean, again, I don't want to be an accuser. I'm not in the business of saying bad things about the Archbishop. That's not what I'm interested in. But, on the BBC, the head of the BBC Religion said on Sunday morning, he said, it looks to me that Justin has lied. Now, that seems to me that's a problem.
Yeah, absolutely. Do you think he's going to... Look, there's a petition now up to 11,500. We've got a bishop, Dr. Helen Ann Hartley. She's actually spoken out and called for him to go. The Prime Minister over the COP29 summit in Azerbaijan, he's been asked about Welby's future. He said, let me be clear of what I know of the allegations. They're clearly horrific, blah, 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 blah. It's a matter in the end for the church. But I'm not going to shy away from the fact, saying these are horrific allegations. My thoughts with the victims, etc. But we're probably going to see Buckingham Palace is going to be asked about this as well. Do you think really Welby's days or possibly hours are numbered?
At the senior leadership of the church, there continues to be a need for culture change in many ways to catch up with the good things that are happening on the ground. The question is, who can make that change happen? Who can bring this to completion? Who can follow through the recommendations they're making? It seems to me all the evidence is that Justin Welby has lost the confidence of clergy, he's lost the confidence of colleagues, he's lost the confidence of people outside the church. The number of articles from the Daily Telegraph and the Spectator and other which you might expect to support him. And the critical thing is he's lost the confidence of the survivors who he promised to meet and he didn't. Now, personally, I haven't got a crystal ball. I can't tell you what's going to happen this afternoon. Given that situation, it seems to me that I cannot see how Justin Welby can be the person who leads us into the change that we need.
Really appreciate you joining us, Dr Ian Paul, Associate Minister at St Nick's Church in Nottingham, member of the Archbishop's Council. Tom Slater listening to all of that. We discussed this a bit earlier. Do you think Archbishop Welby can survive?
Well, I mean, it certainly seems unlikely. I mean, it's very difficult to actually remove an archbishop.
It'll have to be him choosing
by
to
his
go.
own volition. But there's a certain point in which, if people are just lacking any confidence in you whatsoever, not willing to cooperate with you on whatever it is they need to cooperate on, there's a certain point in which that takes on its own momentum. We might be seeing that momentum being taken on this afternoon.
Yeah, indeed. Very interesting. Well, we'll see any developments. They'll bring them first to you here at Talk. Up next, we're going to talk about a brand new pill to help people quit smoking. Is it better than vaping? That seems to be the last time there was actually an invention which seemed to actually really help people quit smoking. We'll get some latest details on that. This is Talk, the home of common sense.
This Labour disillusioned view that every person that send their kids to a private school is bleeding minted is rubbish. My parents scrimped and saved to save me and my brother. That was the decision they made. I think it's disgusting. And more than anything, what it does, apart from double tax people who want to make that commitment, is it's going to force kids out of private schools and back into comprehensive situations and make worse the problems that Labour are apparently trying to sort out, isn't it?
It's a policy which is bonkers, but also, you know, we need to look around the world. No other country taxes education.
Smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon to you. This is Talk the Home of Common Sense. 12:53 is the time. Just time for one last topic, although I'm trying to get some more texts and tweets coming in about the Archbishop of Canterbury. You're not that keen on him staying in the job. Wonder if he'll last in that job. Whether he'll last as long as Gary Lineker, who's leaving BBC in 2026. But let's talk about whether or not you'll carry on being a smoker if you're one of the, well, very small minority of people actually who smoke now, because we know that vaping has had a huge impact on people's ability to give up smoking. Also, I think the ban in 2007 on people smoking in most indoor places, pubs and restaurants and workplaces, did actually make it a lot easier for a lot of people to give up. But the latest effort is a new, improved stop smoking pill, which they reckon tens of thousands of people will be able to use to quit on the NHS. Well, let's talk about this with pharmacist and healthcare expert Soren Govind, who joins us now. Hello, Soren.
Lovely to see you, Julia. Again, varenicline. We can never say it, can we? But that's the name of it.
Who, by the way, who comes up with the names of these drugs? I've never been able to pronounce any of them.
Don't worry, I have that problem too. So complete sympathy. So this is a daily tablet given over a few months, and it's as effective as vapes and more effective than nicotine replacement gum or patches. But if I'm honest, if we just take this back a few stages, a few years ago we had Champix, which was this drug, a branded version of this drug, and it was on the market, and it was then withdrawn due to some impurities. So I understand some of the excitement that we've got a generic version of this drug. So it's a cheaper version. It means it will do the same job, but it is cheaper to manufacture because all of those rules have come underway. But I'm excited for it being available, but I think just a bit of
We've always been a bit worried. We're always told every drug's a wonder drug. We've had this about the fat jabs, haven't we? Now we've had people who've died as a result of taking the fat jabs. We had to look into the circumstances there. But this is the thing, look, smoking is bad for you. Every single cigarette you smoke is bad for you. And anything that can help people give up is a good thing. We've had nicotine patches, nicotine chewing gum, a lot of it available in the NHS. And we've had vaping. And the NHS, unusually in the Western world, actually were very pro-vaping. And sort of, look, it's not good for you, it's still quite bad for you, but it's nothing like as bad for you as smoking. Now there seems to be a turn on vaping, a little bit of hysteria about disposable vapes and some kids vaping, although it's illegal for them to be sold to them. Do you think the stop smoking pill will do the job that vaping has done, or do people still need vaping? Because a lot of people who smoke, they still quite like the actual physical movement of smoking with the vape, don't they?
Yeah, so that is that hand-to-mouth action. And if you're going to quit anything, even if it's smoking, there is what we call the cycle of change. And there is that process that you go through when you're making a change. And for some people, it is that hand-to-mouth action. What I would say is, look, stopping smoking is one of the biggest health interventions that you can make for yourselves. Even within 20 minutes, your pulse returns to normal. After 10 years, there's even more great news because your risk of death from lung cancer will have halved compared to a smoker's. So look, this is a big intervention for your health. And to me, if there's another thing that we can armour that we can offer towards patients, then that is positive, especially given we haven't had this available to us.
Should it be available on the NHS, though? Because I do have a real issue with this stuff. Everyone goes, oh, well, it saves the NHS money in the long run. Someone who can afford, what is it, 15 quid or whatever it is now for a packet of fags, or even if they're getting off the back of a lorry, 8 quid, I don't know. But they can afford to buy these pills, can't they? It really irritates me that my money's being spent on people basically getting given a drug that costs me money when they can afford it themselves.
Well, look, I think we need to consider this is a prescription-only medication, so it's going to be regulated as to how people obtain it. As people who are prescribing it will also be asking people what they've already tried. So I think we need to put this in perspective here. I think this is one of a number of measures. But in order to quit smoking, most people do well by using some sort of an intervention like this alongside behavioural support. And one of my worries as well is we need to have that behavioural support in place.
OK, really good to talk to you. Thank you very much. Soren Govind, pharmacist and healthcare expert. Tom, I don't think you've ever been a smoker?
No, I am.
You are, you're still a smoker, not moved onto the vapes, don't want to take the pills or nicotine patches.
Every time they try and clamp down in a very juvenile fashion, I double down. So, but no, not a lot less than I used to.
How many do you smoke a day?
Oh, these days I've got it down to just while I'm drinking. So, about 45.
45? That other chuckle you can hear, by the way, is Ian Collins. He's just arrived. Yeah. Does special. See, I genuinely, this is my thing. I don't understand, and please no disrespect to my audience as well, I think it's so insane to smoke. Mm-hmm. Because they are literally cancer sticks. Oh, yeah. Like, everyone is bad for you. The nonsense about... But the nonsense about alcohol, the small amounts of alcohol, or even moderate amounts of alcohol either, are not bad for you. There's no proof of that, whereas smoking is. So why do it?
Because it's fun, pleasurable, enjoyable.
Have you got every right to do it, as far as I can
It's really well hard, isn't it? like Tom.
Social smoker.
Kind of socially, and... you see, I would have always had you down as somebody who, back in the old Fleet Street days, you know, when newsrooms were full of people...
When I've been drunk as a teenager, I've probably gone through 10 in my life. No, never liked it, never got it, never got it. Never done cocaine either. That's the thing that my husband's saving for our pension. We're going to do it. I'm going to do cocaine for the first time on pay-per-view. How fast can she actually talk?
Yeah,
You'd watch that.
What would you be like on that stuff?
Imagine, folks, imagine.
I'd be paying for that as well.
Exactly. What's